Lord of Mysteries, From the Heavenly Lord's Spare Tire to the Red Priest by Ba Ji Shou de Tuzu Lei. Chapter 51-75. After this conversation, Avon basically understood Robert's political leanings and where he would stand in the future. Robert Horne was undoubtedly an enlightened person, supporting the Industrial Revolution and reforms, while also being a leader of the younger generation within the Conservative Party, not believing that the aristocracy would necessarily be eliminated. The younger generation had already formed a faction within the Conservative Party. Though not large, it had established a common political program and possessed considerable influence, already having a profound impact on Loan's political scene. From the repeal of the Grain Bill to the current obstruction of Duke Niggan's bill, the younger generation of the Conservative Party had proven through their actions that the Conservative Party could not control Parliament without them. In Avon's eyes, the political niche of these individuals was that of a crucial minority, small but capable, highly efficient, and ambitious. This crucial minority might not even be exclusive to the Conservative Party, but rather showed a trend of cross-party collaboration. The support of many new party members for Robert this time was a clear example. Although the Conservative Party and the new party had not yet reached the point of irreconcilable conflict like the Great, Beautiful Country in Avon's previous life, a political figure capable of mobilizing both parties for cooperation was still remarkable. Therefore, this obstruction not only dealt a heavy blow to Duke Niggan, causing him to lose face, but also expanded Robert's influence. Now everyone knew he was one of the few individuals capable of fostering cross-party cooperation, and this perception brought immeasurable political influence to Robert. Just as Avon was about to ask Robert for more details, Mr. Walker, the butler, knocked and entered, holding two red invitations with gold inlays, which he handed to Robert, and at the same time said to Avon, "These are the invitations Earl Hall just sent again, inviting both sirs to attend the banquet at his home tomorrow evening." Robert did not open the invitations to read their contents, but instead looked at both sides of them, smiling as he said, "Earl Hall reissuing the invitation with this highest grade invitation means he has proactively raised the standard of tomorrow's banquet. It seems he has completed communication with Duke Niggan and is preparing to mediate for us." Avon took the invitation Robert handed him, flipping it over front and back, and touching the gold foil on it. He couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, "How extravagant." At the same time, he nodded in agreement with Robert's judgment. Earl Hall must have been confident to issue such a high-profile invitation, otherwise, if Duke Niggan didn't attend, Earl Hall would become a laughingstock. "Have you completed the draft for the government employee recruitment bill?" Robert asked Avon after a moment of thought. Avon was startled. Robert was clearly not just going to brief Earl Hall at tomorrow's banquet, but intended to use this bill as a bargaining chip to communicate with all the Conservative Party bigwigs. "It's completed. I was just about to ask you to review it. We'll be pulling an all-nighter tonight. Avon, go get the draft. Hope, go make 2 cups of coffee. I'm going to revise the bill with Avon tonight. I want this bill to be my first shot fired in the legislative field." "Yes, sir." Mr. Hope stood straight in front of Avon, responding in the manner of a military subordinate. It was clear that Robert intended to truly secure a place in Loan's political arena, telling everyone that he was not just a troublemaker in Parliament, but that he could also propose bills beneficial to the nation's development. Mr. Hope's demeanor also affected Avon. After all, this was a bill he had personally drafted, one that could influence the direction of a nation's progress. Such interference in national affairs was something Avon had never dared to imagine, and his heart gradually warmed. Robert, Avon, and Hope began to review the bill through the night, constantly discussing and repeatedly considering the issue from various perspectives, removing content in the bill that might be highly controversial, and continuously improving and breaking down the implementation plan. For an entire night, the three of them did not sleep, continuously making revisions in the living room of Robert's bedroom. When Mr. Walker, the butler, came to inform them about breakfast, he was startled when he opened the door. The entire room was filled with smoke, and all three men's eyes were unusually red like rabbits. However, the hard work of the night was worth it. At least, in Robert's experience, this bill was exceptionally comprehensive and very likely to impress all parties, and the timing for its promotion was also just right, with both internal and external conditions being favorable. After breakfast, Robert had Avon rest at home in preparation for the evening banquet, while he himself, without delay, took Mr. Hope to consult with some senior legal professionals, asking them to review the bill and see if any issues had been overlooked. A night of intense debate and repeated consideration also left Avon mentally fatigued. A bill that took into account the interests of all parties was truly exhausting, and even though Avon had consumed the Hunter Beander potion, which significantly enhanced his physical abilities, he was still somewhat overwhelmed. So, he returned to his room to rest and slept until the afternoon. When Avon woke up and realized it was already afternoon, he couldn't help but mock himself. I might be the weakest hunter in history, giving up after just one all-nighter. It definitely isn't my problem. It must be that the demoness was too powerful. Just an afternoon of sparring consumed so much of my physical strength. I just don't know what sequence Beander Robert is. He stayed up all night like me, yet he looks refreshed and shows no signs of fatigue at all. Mr. Hope is the same. Avon unhesitatingly blamed his weakness on the demoness, Helen, from yesterday, though he himself felt a bit guilty and secretly wondered if he should find some tonic medicine. When Avon left his room and went downstairs, he found Butler Walker entertaining a group of guests in the reception room of the Earl's mansion. Upon seeing Avon, Butler Walker immediately greeted him and introduced the guests to Avon. This is Mrs. Misha, Backland's most renowned designer. She has designed clothes for many nobles, and Her Majesty the Queen's grand attire for last year's New Year's Eve ball was personally designed by Mrs. Misha, causing a sensation throughout the venue. She and her assistant will measure you and then alter clothes on site to prepare your formal wear for tonight's banquet. A lady around 30 years old, with a beautiful face, tall stature, and elegant demeanor, stood up and extended her hand to Avon, saying, "Mr. Robert is a famous handsome man in Backland's upper society. I didn't expect his younger brother to be even more heroic and extraordinary. Rest assured, I will make sure you wear the most appropriate attire to tonight's banquet," making every lady attending the banquet's eyes light up. Avon had originally planned to wear the formal attire he brought from Tingen, but he hadn't expected Butler Walker to directly invite a designer. However, this was a kind gesture from the butler, and he naturally wouldn't refuse. So he kissed Mrs. Misha's hand and said, "Then I'll leave it to you, madam." Night descended, and lights began to illuminate the city. Because Earl Hall had elevated his family dinner to a large conservative party gathering, more guests arrived than initially anticipated. Fortunately, Earl Hall had a good wife, otherwise, there would have been a chaotic situation. The sky hadn't completely darkened yet, but many guests had already arrived in their private carriages. It could be said that today was a gathering of influential figures, but when the carriage bearing the emblem of the Horn family, belonging to Earl Ahova, arrived, it still drew everyone's attention. Even Lord Hibbert Hall, Earl Hall's eldest son, who had been greeting guests at the main entrance, rushed out to welcome them after being informed by a servant. Others might not know all the inside information, but this lord knew that the expansion of today's dinner into a large conservative party gathering was all thanks to this young counselor. "Welcome, Counselor Robert, my father has been waiting for you inside." "And this gentleman is?" Lord Hibbert asked, looking at Avon, though he already knew the answer. "He is my younger brother, Avon, who just arrived in Backland from Ahova County. Thanks to the Earl's generous invitation, he also received an invitation, so I brought him along to see the world," Robert introduced Avon with a smile. Lord Hibbert politely greeted Avon, then warmly escorted the two brothers into the ballroom. As Avon watched Lord Hibbert leading the way, he thought of the description of him in the original work, Lord of the Mysteries. This was a typical noble young master who inherited the Horn family's excellent genes in appearance but whose character was completely off. Even his own younger brother, Miss Justice Audrey's second brother, couldn't stand him and went to the southern continent to make his own way. Avon, possessing the hunter's keen observation skills and the assassin's sharp senses, could feel that Lord Hibbert was actually very eager to befriend their brothers. However, Avon's first thought upon seeing him was, he might be a breakthrough point to restrain Earl Hall, especially with an incident that would happen later, which could be an excellent bargaining chip. Thinking of this, Avon felt that he was being too calculating, always calculating everything he saw. When Robert and Avon appeared at the dinner, they immediately attracted everyone's attention. Robert himself was a famous handsome man in Backland, and his brother Avon was no less striking. Coupled with the fact that the two brothers actually looked somewhat alike, they naturally drew much attention. Robert was an important guest at tonight's dinner, so Earl Hall, as the host, naturally had to appear in person. Avon saw a middle-aged man in a dark tailcoat, with a handsome mustache and a potbelly, yet still retaining a youthful and handsome appearance, step forward from the crowd and say, "Welcome, Counselor Robert, this must be your brother. He's as distinguished as you are. You flatter him, Earl. He is my younger brother, Avon, who just arrived in Backland from Tingen a few days ago." Robert introduced Avon to Earl Hall again. Avon immediately stepped forward, looking at Earl Hall with admiration and excitedly saying, "Hello, Earl. I often hear from my brother about your bold investments in industry and infrastructure when you were young. My brother has always urged me to learn from you, to learn your enterprising spirit and your daring courage." Earl Hall had heard countless compliments in his life, but most were related to his status and wealth. Even when his early investments were mentioned, it would usually turn to him having a good father and a good background. People like Robert and Avon, who appreciated his decisiveness in handling matters, were extremely rare, and it immediately hit Earl Hall's sweet spot. It's nothing. Since Emperor Rosal initiated the Industrial Revolution, industrial development has been the direction of social progress. Almost everyone can see this point. I just took a slight lead. Earl Hall stroked his mustache and said modestly. Avon, however, disagreed, shaking his head and saying, "Investing in industry and technology is risky. Everyone knows it can generate huge profits and is willing to invest, but they only use their spare money. Who would sell their highly profitable land at that time to invest? Even now, thinking about it, I can feel your courage back then. I imagine many people didn't understand your actions at the time, did they? Yes. Even my father didn't understand it then, and many people said I would squander the Horn family's fortune. Some even said I would be the last Earl of Eastchester." Avon's words immediately stirred the Earl's memories. Earl Hall still looked reflective when recalling the situation back then. The victor is beyond reproach. Truth is ultimately held by only a few. Time has proven everything. Your achievements today are all due to your foresight and courage back then. I believe the old Earl, in the goddess's kingdom, will also be greatly comforted seeing all of this." Avon's words made Earl Hall exceptionally proud, for this was indeed the proudest accomplishment of his life. He had used facts to prove everyone wrong, demonstrating that he was the one who was right. Earl Hall's gaze towards Avon grew increasingly gentle, then he said, "You don't always have to call me Earl, from now on, it's too formal. You can just call me Uncle, from now on." "All right, Uncle Hall." Lord Hibbert Hall, Earl Hall's eldest son, stared wide-eyed, never expecting Avon to flatter his father so effectively with just a few words. Earl Hall had never been so amiable towards him, which even made him feel a surge of jealousy. Robert, meanwhile, just watched with a smile, saying nothing. Just then, another servant came to announce that Duke Nigan and his wife, along with his brother Prime Minister Ogwit, had arrived. Earl Hall's smile faded, and he looked at Robert gravely, saying, "Let's go to the entrance together to greet them." Robert nodded slightly, not wanting to offend Earl Hall. So Earl Hall and Robert went out together to greet Duke Nigan. Avon and Lord Hibbert, who were standing by, naturally followed, along with some observant guests, eventually forming a large welcoming party. Duke Nigan, descending from his carriage, felt a surge of pride seeing so many people greeting him. However, upon seeing Robert next to Earl Hall, his face immediately fell, though he quickly forced a smile and greeted Earl Hall and Robert. Robert then introduced Avon once more to Duke Nigan and the Prime Minister, though it was clearly not as warm as his earlier interaction with Earl Hall. After each noble stepped forward to greet Duke Nigan, the dinner officially began. When everyone had arrived in the ballroom, Earl Hall, the host of the banquet, ascended to his second-floor balcony, stood before the railing, and holding a glass of Ormir red wine as red as blood, addressed the guests below. "Thank you all for attending this banquet. Let us drink the first toast, thanking the deity we believe in, for it is he who has bestowed everything upon us." Everyone raised their glasses and took a sip. "Thank you for the prosperity of the kingdom, this is the cornerstone of stability." Everyone followed Earl Hall and took another sip. Finally, "Thank you all for coming, especially Duke Nigan and Prime Minister Ogwood for making time in their busy schedules to be here. Let us drain our glasses." Everyone followed Earl Hall, raising their glasses in a salute to Duke Nigan, and then drank them dry. When the opening remarks concluded, Earl Hall announced the official start of the banquet. He then took his wife's hand and descended from the second floor, beginning the opening dance to the music played by the surrounding orchestra. Following closely behind Earl Hall was the most dazzling jewel of Backland, a founding elder of the Tarot Club, Miss Justice Audrey Hall. In fact, when Earl Hall was delivering his opening remarks from the second-floor railing, Audrey Hall was already standing behind her father, but to give the Earl the stage, everyone had moved away from the railing, so Avon had not seen her before. But when Avon finally saw the long-renowned Miss Justice, he couldn't help but marvel that the original description of her in Lord of the Mysteries was not exaggerated in the slightest. He saw her with golden hair and blue eyes, wearing a pale white long dress with a high collar, high waist, and leg of mutton sleeves. The upper body was tightly bound, and her waist was cinched exceptionally slender. Her elegant golden long hair was neatly coiled high, making her neck appear even more slender and graceful, like a swan's. The subtle glints from her fingers and ears further accentuated her noble and pure temperament. Even with his in-depth understanding of two demoness with Beander potion enhancements and his knowledge from his previous life on Earth, Avon still had to admit that this young woman was the most beautiful he had ever seen in his life. After Earl Hall and his wife began the opening dance, the gentlemen in the ballroom started to look for their first dance partners. Married men typically invited their wives to dance, while unmarried men sought out other unmarried ladies. Everyone was generally quite familiar with each other and quickly found their partners. At this moment, Robert and Avon, being single dogs, suddenly stood out. Robert usually attended official banquets and rarely participated in such social gatherings, so the young ladies of Backland were unfamiliar with him and hesitated to approach. Avon, on the other hand, was attending a Backland ball for the first time. However, this situation did not last long. Soon, two noble young ladies, blushing, personally stepped forward to strike up a conversation, and Robert and Avon, in turn, invited the two young ladies to dance. When the song ended, everyone stopped and applauded together, and then it was time for free socializing. The two young ladies, their faces flushed, hurried away, holding up their ball gowns. Just then, a servant in a red waistcoat approached Robert and whispered something, and Robert then turned to Avon and said, "Earl Hall wants me to come over, likely to mediate a reconciliation between Duke Nigan and me. I will also propose the government employee recruitment reform bill. It's possible he'll call you over too, so be prepared." Avon nodded and said, "I understand." After Robert left, Avon looked around and noticed that apart from those who had started their second dance, everyone else was gathered in small groups, chatting. Avon was not interested in joining their circles. Since waking up from his nap that afternoon, he had been fussed over by Mrs. Misha and hadn't eaten a single bite. His stomach was already rumbling with hunger. Filling his stomach was Avon's top priority right now. The food prepared for Earl Hall's banquet was exceptionally abundant. Long tables were laden with pan-fried foie gras, roasted steak, roasted spring chicken, fried fish, stewed lamb, and glasses of Ormir red wine, misty champagne. Avon even saw Tears of the Moon from Tingen. Avon took a plate, chose some of his favorite foods, and went to a dining table on the second floor near the balcony, ready to eat. But just as he sat down, Avon's peripheral vision caught sight of a large golden retriever peering intently into the ballroom from the shadows of the balcony outside the French windows. What the heck, I didn't sense a dog nearby before. Have my keen instincts from being a hunter and assassin failed? Oh, right, this is Miss Justice Audrey's home. This is Miss Audrey's beloved dog, Susie, the future dog of fantasies. Avon was startled by the golden retriever he hadn't noticed before, almost jumping out of his seat, but he quickly realized this was Earl Hall's home. Seeing Susie staring at him without blinking, Avon understood that this was a spectator watching him. He suddenly felt like he was performing on a school stage in his previous life, being scrutinized by the school leaders below. It was like sitting on pins and needles, inexplicably nervous. Why don't you come over and eat something too? Avon was just a little nervous and didn't know what to say, so he blurted out a casual remark. But he didn't expect the golden retriever to actually walk over, even licking its lips. Although he hadn't expected the dog to actually come over, since the words were already out, Avon couldn't go back on them. More importantly, it might also be an opportunity to get to know Audrey. So, Avon raised his hand and summoned a servant in a red waistcoat, asking the servant to get him another plate. Then he cut and transferred the roasted steak from his own plate and placed it in front of the golden retriever, Susie. The golden retriever sniffed it, then happily began to eat, while Avon, who hadn't eaten all day, also devoured his food, and for a moment, it was surprisingly harmonious. Why aren't you socializing, but staying in the corner? Although your brother abolished the grain bill and offended many nobles, there are also many people very interested in you two brothers. Avon was eating happily when he suddenly felt someone approach him and speak. Avon looked up and saw a young man in his 20s, slightly unpolished, who had already sat down in front of him. He even reached out and patted Susie's head, then said, "This is Earl Hall's most beloved youngest daughter, the jewel of Backland, Miss Audrey's beloved dog. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself, my name is Earl Glint, and I have just inherited the title of Viscount." Avon put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and then shook hands with him, saying, "Actually, I don't particularly like these kinds of occasions, nor do I plan to build connections here. Besides, I'll be joining Military Intelligence Section 9 next week, so we're not the same kind of people anymore. That's why I don't bother to play along." Avon's subtext was that they weren't the same kind of people, so there was no need to put effort into him. But to his surprise, Viscount Glint's eyes lit up as he asked, "Have you already become a Beyonder?" Avon knew that the existence of Beyonders was not a secret in aristocratic circles, so he nodded naturally. Seeing Avon admit that he was a Beyonder, Viscount Glint became even more excited and deliberately lowered his voice, saying, "I wonder which pathway's Beyonder you are. Is it a pathway owned by the Horn family itself?" Viscount Glint's words made Avon frown, feeling that he had overlooked something earlier. The Horn family had a very long history, almost as old as the nation itself. How could such a family not have inherited magic potion formulas? However, Avon guessed that the magic potion formula owned by the Horn family should not be the Hunter Pathway's magic potion formula, otherwise, Robert would have given it to him directly. Considering that the Augustus royal family was of the Justiciar pathway, it was highly probable that the Horn family, as their vassals, had been bestowed with the Arbiter and Lawyer magic potion formulas. So, Avon shook his head at Glint, denying his conjecture, and Viscount Glint's excitement was palpable as he cautiously asked, "Then, are you a Beyonder of the apothecary pathway? Do you have the apothecary pathway's formula?" Glint's question suddenly made Avon realize who the person in front of him was. He was the middleman who introduced Audrey, Furs, and Zio to each other, and he had been tirelessly seeking the apothecary magic potion formula. Avon's heart stirred, and he suddenly felt that this person had some potential use, so he smiled and said, "I am not a Beyonder of the apothecary pathway, but I know where to find the apothecary magic potion formula." "Where?" Glint asked impatiently, but then he saw Avon smile without speaking, and suddenly sobered up, saying, "Do you have any requests? I can help you with anything I can do." Avon shook his head and said, "Actually, I don't know what to ask for. I'm not short on money, so how about this? You owe me a favor, and I'll tell you how to obtain the apothecary magic potion formula." Compared to owing Avon a favor, Viscount Glint actually preferred to buy it with money, because he knew that favors were harder to repay. However, he also didn't want to give up this opportunity to obtain the coveted magic potion formula. After much deliberation, he still nodded and agreed. In fact, Avon could directly transcribe a copy of the apothecary magic potion formula from Lord of the Mysteries in his mind, but Avon did not do so because he wanted to use this person to probe the Harvest Church located in south of the bridge, to see if Father Utravsky had developed serious psychological problems, and to see if he could establish contact with him. If he could, it would also be good news for Avon. After all, Avon knew that Backland would not be peaceful in the future. If he could connect with Father Utravsky, it would greatly enhance Avon's sense of security. If he encountered something and couldn't hide in the Evernight Church, he could also run there. He is a favored one of the Earth Mother, and I am a favored one of the Evernight Goddess. We should have friendly exchanges, which can also promote the relationship between the deities behind us. Avon had always been very confused by the title, Crimson Lord, in the Evernight Goddess's honorific name, because it clearly belonged to the apothecary pathway, and was also a characteristic of the moon pathway. Furthermore, in Rosal's diary, Mr. Dorr once clearly stated that the Evernight Goddess represented stars, and currently there is no sequence 0 in the moon pathway, which couldn't help but make Avon's imagination run wild. And even if Glint couldn't obtain the apothecary formula from the Harvest Church, it didn't matter. Avon had prepared a second path for him, which was Dayquil, who would soon arrive in Backland from Tingen. The life school of thought, where Dayquil belonged, practiced master-disciple inheritance. If Glint could become a disciple, then Avon might again enter the sight of the Snake of Fate, who might have already arrived in Backland, and perhaps even get a round of investment. Avon told Glint the news about the Harvest Church, which made Glint a bit conflicted. After all, he was not a follower of the Earth Mother, but a follower of the Evernight Goddess. Going to another deity's church still presented a psychological barrier for him. As Glint was deliberating, several other noble youths came forward to greet him, but it was clear they weren't looking for Glint, but for trouble with Avon. One of them looked at Avon with disdain and said, "This gentleman has been dining alone here. Is it because he's new and doesn't have a dance partner? Do you need us to introduce one to you?" Avon returned the disdainful look, his chin slightly raised, as he scrutinized the rude speaker, making two tisk-tisk sounds from his mouth, and said with sympathetic eyes, "With your appearance, it's inevitable to have such a misunderstanding. Ugly people always judge others by themselves, thinking that others will lack dance partners just like them. Please have some self-awareness, restrain your inferiority, and don't display it in front of others." The noble youth whom Avon ironically called ugly, was not actually ugly, but compared to Avon, he paled in comparison, making him unable to refute, not to mention Avon's particularly infuriating tone. So this person, disregarding his aristocratic demeanor, wanted to throw a punch directly, but was stopped by another blue-eyed noble. And as this person stopped his companion, he simultaneously mocked Avon. "May I ask what your title is, to be able to attend this banquet and speak so presumptuously?" This sentence seemed to mock Avon as merely a commoner, but it also implicated Avon's brother, Robert, because in fact, Robert currently held no title either. "I have no title, I am a commoner. I merely had the good fortune to be invited by Earl Hall, thanks to my brother's prestige from abolishing the grain bill last year. I am truly ashamed," Avon said with humble pride. This statement again choked the other party, because their family's income had been halved this year due to the abolition of this bill, and they even had to sell a batch of valuable items to the Imperial Museum to maintain decorum. Robert's blow made some old nobles who relied on land rent for their livelihood vomit blood, which made their so-called aristocratic superiority, seem exceptionally ridiculous, and made his previous sarcasm appear even more absurd. Earl Hall personally greeted Robert before the banquet began, which further indicated that Robert's actual influence could not be measured by any aristocratic title, a point even Duke Nigan acknowledged. Although Lord Wolf might have spoken inappropriately, he meant well in wanting to befriend you. Are you perhaps too aggressive, and don't you think highly enough of us Backland people? Do you intend to cut yourself off from the Backland aristocratic circle? Seeing his two companions choked by Avon, the last person also entered the fray. Good heavens, Avon inwardly exclaimed, good heavens. With just a few sentences, he defined the previous two's provocation as merely inappropriate speech, shifted the responsibility for the conflict onto Avon, and finally raised a banner to threaten him. This made Viscount Glint, who had just met Avon, break into a sweat. He wanted to stand up and smooth things over, but Avon showed no signs of relenting. Why do you come before me to seek attention? Everyone knows the reason without needing to say it. Even beautiful clothes cannot hide your ugly souls. Your actions, in my eyes, are childish and laughable, simply not worth mentioning. As for the circle you speak of cutting yourself off from, that's even more ridiculous. Can your so-called circle influence major national policies or the power structure of the Parliament? Earl Hall and Duke Nigan are also nobles, but do you dare say you can influence these two? Are they really in your circle? So, what exactly do you have that makes it worth my while to curry favor with you? Avon's words were like a short dagger, cutting through their glamorous exteriors, devaluing them to worthlessness, and making them furious. Although the three men were furious with Avon, they ultimately did not dare to lay hands on a guest invited by Earl Hall at Earl Hall's banquet. The three of them had gathered together, drunk a couple of glasses of wine, and become light-headed because their family income had sharply decreased, leading to a sharp decrease in their pocket money. They didn't dare to trouble Robert and felt that Avon, this kid who had just come from the countryside, was easy to bully, so they wanted to come over and humiliate him. But they didn't expect Avon to be sharp-tongued, completely ignoring their background, having no intention of making peace, and not afraid to fall out with them. He directly ridiculed them from beginning to end, leaving them speechless. In this situation, they dared not escalate the matter, because anyone with eyes would know that they were instigating trouble. At that time, without Earl Hall needing to step forward, their fathers would deal with them out of consideration for Earl Hall's reputation. Your Excellency has said so much, but the central meaning is only one, that we, this group of people, are incompetent and useless, unworthy of your effort to deal with. But you are just a student who has just left school. What achievements do you have to look down on as so much? Just as Avon sneered, preparing to respond, a servant in a red waistcoat rushed over and said, Earl Hall invites you to the reception room in the back. He has some questions about the bill you drafted and asks you to go and answer them. The servant's words were like ice water poured over the heads of the furious people present. They all looked at Avon with incredulous eyes. Avon, on the other hand, stood up gracefully, glanced at them, a mocking smile playing on his lips. He then patted the head of the golden retriever, which was quietly lying there after finishing its steak, and without another word, followed the servant away. Only the stunned people remained, looking at each other, their faces flushed, speechless. Finally, they tacitly avoided mentioning what had just happened. As the music by the stage started up again, they dispersed, each seeking a dance partner. Avon was mentally prepared for people to trouble him because of Robert. After all, what Robert had done this past year was indeed quite resentful. However, he didn't expect the people causing trouble to be so low-level, easily dismissed with just a few words. However, Avon thought about it and felt it was reasonable. If those big shots truly bullied the small, that would be truly undignified. As Avon followed the servant to the reception room, he noticed Miss Justice, Audrey, observing the various facets of life in the banquet hall with a detached spectator's gaze. When he saw Audrey, Audrey also saw him. The two exchanged glances, smiled politely, and simply nodded to each other before passing by. Avon didn't want to have any connection with Audrey at this time. The less they interacted in reality, the safer it would be to ask Audrey for help in the tarot club later. However, after they passed each other, a puzzled expression appeared on Audrey's face. Why do I feel like I've seen this person somewhere before? There's a sense of familiarity. And from his expression, it's clear he also recognizes me. It's so strange, but I clearly have no memory of him. What exactly is going on? Audrey was puzzled, then suddenly, her heart stirred. She looked in the direction Avon had come from and saw her beloved dog, Susie, lying under a dining table, sitting quietly, looking at her with deep eyes. This immediately pulled Audrey out of her spectator state, and her expression instantly fell. Upon entering the smoke-filled reception room, Avon found the atmosphere inside better than he had expected. Both Duke Nigan and his brother Robert looked relatively relaxed. After Avon entered and greeted the Conservative Party big shots, he found a seat. Earl Hall sighed. If Robert hadn't told me himself, I really wouldn't have thought that a recent university graduate like you could formulate such a comprehensive policy. You flatter me. It was just a flash of inspiration. I thought, since we students have to take exams to get into higher education and compete, then do government employees need to? Moreover, my experience in school told me that for a policy to go from formulation to implementation, it needs to go through many stages. So why can't we use employees selected by examination as the executive level, and officials mainly elected as the decision-making level? This is the original intention of my proposed bill. Avon's words made all the big shots present nod. Analyzing specific problems specifically and dealing with them specifically is easy to say but difficult to do. Subsequently, the big shots all questioned Avon about their own issues. Avon, with a clear mind and fluent answers, left a deep impression on all the big shots, which made Robert, who was on the side, even more pleased. If I didn't know your age, I'd really wonder if you'd worked in government for decades. Avon, why don't you come to my office as an assistant? You are naturally suited for politics. Prime Minister Agushid looked at the spirited Avon, unable to suppress his admiration for talent, hoping Avon could enter his Prime Minister's office. Before Avon could speak, Robert directly said, Avon is determined to join the army and has already joined Military Intelligence Section 9. He will report next Monday. Everyone present was a big shot. With just this one sentence, they already knew that Avon had become a Beander and understood the path Robert had planned for Avon, feeling regret in their hearts. Instead, Duke Nigan suddenly interjected, saying, entering the military through Military Intelligence Section 9 is indeed a good method. It's just that I don't know if you intend to join the Navy or the Army in the future. Avon pondered for a moment, then quickly replied, regardless of which branch I can enter, it will be my honor. I will strive with all my heart and soul for the interests of the kingdom and the glory of the king. Duke Nigan took a puff from his cigarette, looked at Avon, and nodded, his face devoid of emotion, making his thoughts inscrutable. Earl Hall, seeing that no one was questioning Avon anymore, spoke up. Members of Parliament, gentlemen, do you have any other questions about this government employee examination recruitment bill? Everyone looked at each other and shook their heads. Since there are no objections, then next Monday, Parliament will primarily push this bill, striving to pass it before the recess period arrives. The defeat against the Fasak Empire in the southern continent has put too much pressure on the government right now. This bill can not only remedy the problems discovered earlier but also slightly divert public attention and add leverage for local elections. Everyone present expressed their agreement, some even stood up and shook Robert's hand to congratulate him, and Duke Nigan also did not find fault. This led Avon to guess that under Earl Hall's mediation, Robert and Duke Nigan had temporarily put aside their differences, and the two sides would at least maintain superficial harmony in the future. Sure enough, after the big shots left the reception room and re-entered the ballroom, a dance piece had just ended. Robert stepped forward and directly invited Duke Nigan's wife, Della, to dance. And this lady, prompted by Duke Nigan's nod, gladly accepted the invitation, astounding everyone present. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. The ball lasted until dawn, during which Avon danced with several noblewomen and young ladies, many of whom showed interest in Avon, frequently exchanging glances. However, Avon still had much to discuss with Robert, so he reluctantly declined their invitations and returned home with Robert. In the carriage on the way home, Avon eagerly inquired about matters he couldn't ask earlier. He was curious how Earl Hall had appeased Duke Nigan. Robert was clearly a bit tired. Being with those old foxes was extremely mentally taxing, and even as a Beander, he found it difficult to endure. However, upon hearing Avon's question, he still opened his eyes and replied. It was nothing much, just that he increased his support for me and, along with Prime Minister Ogwat, tried to persuade him. Robert's words immediately resolved the doubts in Avon's heart. Duke Nigan might not have wanted to let Robert off the hook due to his pride, but his brother wanted to settle the matter. Robert had already become the leader of the Conservative Party's young and strong faction, a key minority in the parliament. If this force were lost, the Conservative Party could lose its majority seats in parliament. At that time, it was hard to say what would happen to others, but Prime Minister Ogwat Nigan's position as Prime Minister was almost certain to be lost. Therefore, in persuading Duke Nigan, Prime Minister Ogwat was even more proactive than Earl Hall. This also explained why Prime Minister Ogwat publicly invited Avon to join his Prime Minister's office in front of so many people. Whether Avon accepted the invitation or not was not important. What was important was that he was showing his friendly attitude towards Robert. This time, with the persuasion of Earl Hall and the Prime Minister, Duke Nigan has agreed to let me serve as the chairman of the Military Intelligence Committee of the Parliament, officially entering the decision-making level. The price is that I must align with the party's policies in the future and support the Election Condition Restriction Bill and Constituency Division Bill that Duke Nigan will propose in the Parliament. I also took the opportunity to make an additional request, which was to rename the Government Employee Recruitment Act to the Robert Horne Act. Duke Nigan agreed. Avon's heart filled with joy upon hearing that Robert was to become the chairman of the Military Intelligence Committee of the Parliament. A portion of Military Intelligence Section 9's funding came from the Parliament, and the Military Intelligence Committee was responsible for reviewing this allocation. This meant that even before Avon entered it, he already had a huge, undeniable backer. The benefits of having a backer were self-evident. This meant that Avon's previous plan to quickly gain military merits and raise his rank could be smoothly implemented. No one dared to offend the god of wealth, so no one dared to usurp Avon's achievements, even if Avon was an absolute newcomer. However, Avon's brows quickly furrowed again, because the content of the bill Duke Nigan was going to propose sounded very familiar to Avon. Avon recalled the contents of Lord of the Mysteries and finally understood why it sounded familiar. Because this was what Duke Nigan was pushing for in the original work before his assassination, and it was very likely the reason he brought about his own demise. This bill severely hindered the path for the bourgeoisie to directly participate in politics and governance, and it was bound to face extremely fierce backlash. However, although the aristocratic class was constantly decaying, it still had a first-mover advantage, influencing all levels of the country and holding national power. Therefore, Duke Nigan's strike this time was very likely to succeed. If the historical trend promoted by the Twilight Hermit Order was truly the rise of the bourgeoisie brought about by the Industrial Revolution, then Duke Nigan was stepping further and further into the abyss of death. As for whether Robert's support for Duke Nigan's election condition reform bill would provoke the hostility of the Twilight Hermit Order and bring about his demise, Avon was not worried. As long as Duke Nigan, who was strongly pushing this bill, met with an accident, and no one organized it again, then the possibility of this bill dying in its infancy was very high. So, as long as Duke Nigan was left to stir things up in front, that was fine. Avon could try every possible means to help Klein save Tingen City, only to give Klein more people to care about, more weaknesses, but he would never care about Duke Nigan. If given the chance, Avon would even push him. Because if Duke Nigan met with an accident, then Robert's position within the Conservative Party would become even more important, which was also a great thing for Avon. After all, the higher the position, the rarer it was. It was a matter of one person per position, and to get a position, one had to remove someone. Duke Niggan's death aligned with Avon's interests, but it was a pity for his second wife, Lady Della, who was young and beautiful but would become a widow. "What are you thinking? Why aren't you speaking?" Robert couldn't help but ask when Avon remained silent for a long time. "Nothing much. Oh, by the way, now that you've reconciled with Duke Niggan, there shouldn't be any surprises with the inheritance case, right?" Avon suddenly remembered what the butler had told him a few days ago and asked. Robert was stunned for a moment, not expecting Avon to know about this, but after thinking about it, this matter had caused such a stir that he was bound to know sooner or later. So, he smiled and said, "I didn't want you to worry, so I didn't tell you. As for whether this matter will simply be dropped, I'm not sure. Even if Duke Niggan is truly behind this, I can't bring it up publicly, and Duke Niggan wouldn't admit it. However, if it really is him, I think this matter will be clear in a few days." Avon nodded in agreement, then solemnly said to Robert, "I know you didn't tell me about this because you didn't want me to worry, but I've grown up. We are brothers, so please don't hide such things from me anymore. Please be sure to tell me, I want to help too." Robert looked at the earnest Avon, and his heart filled with relief. He also solemnly agreed to Avon. Tinghan City, Golden Banyan District, Golden Apple Street. Klein, dressed in formal attire, looked at the gate in front of him. From the gate, he looked into the villa with its huge garden and felt an immense sense of emotion. While he himself was still renting a room, someone was living in a villa in the center of the city. This made Klein, who had never lived in a mansion in 2 lifetimes, feel an uncontrollable envy. Today was Sunday, and Klein had received an inner-city letter. The sender was none other than Butler Buck, whom Avon had introduced not long ago. Butler Buck had been diligently helping Avon find investment opportunities during this time and had already achieved some results. However, before Avon left Tinghan, he had repeatedly stressed that all investment opportunities must be reviewed by his classmate, Klein, which Butler Buck found very puzzling. Because according to the information gathered in the past few days, Mr. Klein, like Avon, had just graduated from university, and he had studied history, not finance, management, or lawyer. His family also had no investment business, and Butler Buck didn't know why Avon wanted him to do the final review. But Butler Buck was a person who strictly adhered to his duties as a butler. For an employer's instructions, he would execute them whether he understood them or not. So, yesterday he wrote a letter to Klein, inviting him to come here today to review some of the materials Butler Buck had prepared. And Butler Buck also decided that he must keep a close eye on Klein. If Klein gave an error investment opinion, he would definitely refute it. "What would you like to drink? Our manor has everything. Various teas, coffees, wines, etc." Butler Buck politely asked after seeing Klein. Tea will be fine." It was Klein's first time visiting a Hova Earl's court, and he felt dazzled by everything around him. It was even more luxurious and beautiful than the Western-style manors he had seen in movies in his previous life. Whether it was the ubiquitous murals on the walls, the ancient stone carvings, or the southern continent carpets underfoot, everything constantly displayed the Horn family's heritage, leaving Klein overwhelmed. Butler Buck was already accustomed to Klein's furtive glances. Everyone who came to this villa expressed heartfelt admiration, which made Butler Buck, who managed the villa, deeply proud. After both parties had a sip of tea and exchanged a few pleasantries, Butler Buck took out a large stack of documents and placed them in front of Klein for his review. Klein knew Avon's intention in having him review these investments was to prevent anyone from using Beander powers for investment fraud, to fight Beander with Beander. So Klein requested a quiet, private room for the review. Butler Buck hesitated. He actually wanted to personally observe how Klein reviewed investments, but since Klein had made the request, he couldn't refuse to make arrangements. He then arranged for Klein to be in a large study and subsequently left. 2 days prior, the mystery prior sent by the Holy See had arrived. He was a kind and knowledgeable elder who had lived and traveled abroad in his youth and now wished to return to his hometown. Since old Neil in Tingen had passed away, the Holy See sent him to Tingen at his request. For the past 2 days, Klein had been learning mystical knowledge from him and had greatly benefited, which significantly boosted Klein's confidence in his own divinations. Sitting at the desk, Klein unfastened the silver chain with a yellow crystal wrapped around his left hand, and a wave of silence washed over him. This pendulum was standard equipment that old Neil had guided him to apply for, but now the crystal pendulum remained, while old Neil had already departed. However, Klein quickly composed himself, categorized all the documents in front of him, separated them, and then began to use the pendulum divination method on each investment. However, Klein knew that every investment carried risks, and he lacked the relevant knowledge to discern them. Therefore, he did not divine whether the investment was risky, only whether Beyonder powers were involved in these investments. Klein held the silver chain in his left hand, letting the yellow crystal dangle over the investment documents. Then, he concentrated, half-closed his eyes, and the atmosphere around him instantly became quiet. The clear and pure yellow crystal began to rotate clockwise, carrying the uniquely designed silver chain. Klein breathed a sigh of relief, set aside the documents for this investment, and then self-mockingly said, "This is investment auditing." Soon, Klein divined several investments and found no Beyonder powers at work, which made him feel exceptionally relieved. The investment plan Butler Buck found for Avon totaled £10,000. If it ultimately received Avon's approval and was invested, Klein could receive at least £50 in commission according to their previous agreement. This was almost several months of Klein's salary. Klein had not yet completed his team assignment, so he was still paid as an administrative staff member, not a full team member. Just as Klein was about to organize the documents to hand over to Butler Buck, he suddenly remembered what Avon had told him on the steam train, that he had made some arrangements in Tingen to see if they could hinder the mastermind. However, due to the mastermind's unique nature, these arrangements could not be spoken of and could only be left to chance. So, was Avon hinting that there were the mastermind's arrangements in these investments by telling him this before and then arranging for him, an outsider, to safeguard his investments? Klein was alarmed. He looked at the documents on the desk that he had already reorganized, then sat down again and began to view the investments before him from his own perspective. Finally, Klein picked up an investment prospectus with the highest investment share, reaching £3,000, and frowned. This iron ore investment bid was perfectly executed in all aspects. All sorts of certificates were complete, including property deeds and exploration reports. It even bore the seal of the Civilis County local government and the endorsement of a professional survey company. Most importantly, the iron ore owner even had a photo with the Tingen city mayor and DeVille. The iron ore had even started preliminary operations, but due to initial funding issues, it was forced to seek investment. This investment seemed so flawless, an absolute sure-win business for investors. However, for Zhou Mingrui, who had experienced the era of information explosion, the more perfect something appeared, the more cautious and suspicious he became. Property deeds and survey reports could be faked, and photos with the mayor and celebrities were nothing. Zhou Mingrui had even heard that when some fraud rings were busted, the employees of the fraudulent company didn't even know that their boss was using them as a front for fraud. Klein constantly recalled every word Avon had said earlier, recalling why Avon wanted him to help audit the investments. "I'm preparing to let my old butler, Mr. Buck, look for investment opportunities for me. This world has Beyonder powers, such as swindler, lawyer, spectator, and the like, making it impossible to guard against them. I'm worried the old butler might not be able to handle it, so I want you to help him vet them. If we truly secure good investment opportunities, how about I give you a 0.5% commission?" Avon's words echoed in Klein's mind. Re-examining the investment documents before him, Klein said with a grim face, "Swindler." Through spectator, Klein knew that some Beyonder powers did not just directly affect others, they could also indirectly affect others. Such abilities could not be divined by Klein to reveal traces of mystical power. Knowing that the mastermind might be involved in this investment, Klein impatiently stood up, put on his coat again, and wanted to investigate further, but he quickly stopped his actions. Because he realized that this investment was very likely a focal point for the mastermind, perhaps even the mastermind's main mission. Otherwise, Avon would not have given him such a solemn and cryptic hint. Even though the mastermind was severely injured due to the true creator, if he investigated further, it would be difficult to guarantee that other incidents wouldn't occur, such as the Old Neil tragedy repeating itself. What should I do? Klein clenched his fists, his heart filled with vexation. Suddenly, Klein thought again of a very special instruction Avon had given him among his various admonitions, to let Leonard know as much as possible about the mastermind behind the scenes and drag him into it. Klein also observed Leonard and highly suspected that the secret behind Leonard was related to a high-sequence power. At least when Klein explained to Leonard that many Beyonder incidents had recently occurred in Tingen with a mastermind behind them, his acceptance was very high. He almost immediately believed everything and actively expressed cooperation. This indicated that the high-sequence power behind Leonard could perceive the mastermind's interference. Since Avon had made arrangements to let him know the mastermind's next plan, there wouldn't be no solution left. Klein believed Leonard was the solution Avon hinted at. Thinking of this, Klein put on his coat again, donned his top hat, and left, holding only the iron ore investment data. Before leaving, Klein informed Butler Buck that he had doubts about the iron ore investment and would conduct an investigation. Although Butler Buck felt this was an unnecessary step, Avon had repeatedly emphasized his trust in Klein, so he said nothing more and allowed Klein to take the data. Nighthawks work on a rotation system, and today, Leonard, like Klein, was off duty. So Klein didn't hesitate, directly boarding a public carriage and heading towards Leonard's house. Having been to Leonard's house before, Klein was familiar with the route, changing a few public carriages along the way. He easily traveled the longest distance with the least money, and soon arrived at Leonard's house again. After ringing the doorbell, it was a long time before Leonard opened the door. Only today, he had lost his unrestrained demeanor, instead constantly yawning and sporting dark circles under his eyes. Leonard let Klein into the house, and while making tea for Klein, he complained, "Do you know that nighthawks usually sleep during the day? Is there something so urgent that you had to come find me now?" Klein took the tea Leonard made, felt it was very hot with his hand, and immediately put it on the coffee table, asking in confusion, "You're a Beyonder of the sleepless pathway. You actually have dark circles under your eyes. How many days have you gone without sleep?" Leonard looked at the energetic Klein and said, on the verge of tears, "Recently, my grandma got addicted to card games. The day before yesterday, I had just finished my shift, and she dragged me to play cards with her. I thought I'd just tough it out, and when the old lady got tired, it would end. But I never expected my grandma to be even more resilient than me, and her luck was exceptionally good, making her incredibly excited. She pulled me into playing for an entire day and night. You know, I generally don't sleep during my shifts. This time, I've been up for 3 days and 3 nights. Even a sleepless like me can't take it." Listening to Leonard's complaints, Klein's mouth twitched. He never expected a grandmother's card addiction could wear down a sleepless. Taking a deep breath and suppressing his laughter, Klein decided to get straight to the point, directly handing the data he had been holding to Leonard, then saying, "First, take a look at this investment data, and then we'll talk about the matter." Leonard looked at Klein with some surprise, not knowing what he meant, but still took the data and read it carefully. At first, Leonard still had a relaxed expression, but by the end, he became increasingly serious. He even suspected whether Klein knew about the old man within him, and therefore intentionally found such data to test him. Leonard should know that the old man is of the Marauder pathway, because in the final battle in Tingen, Leonard actively requested the sealed artifact, Vascular Thief. He just didn't know that the Marauder pathway had the sequence, Parasite. But he quickly dismissed this conjecture, because they had an understanding. before dealing with the mastermind, they couldn't deliberately probe each other's secrets. Leonard didn't believe Klein would dare to break this understanding. It looks like there's nothing wrong with it, it's a high-quality investment project. What do you mean by showing this to me? As soon as Klein heard this, he took the data back, pretended to leave, and said at the same time, if you haven't figured it out, there's no point in telling you. I'm leaving first. Hey, don't leave. I was just kidding with you, why are you getting upset? Isn't this just a swindler committing fraud? Just report it to the captain and arrest him, right? Do you need to specifically come all the way here to tell me? Seeing Klein about to leave, Leonard anxiously stopped him, and at the same time, voiced his doubts. And Klein, seeing that Leonard was no longer playing dumb, solemnly said to him, the problem now is that I'm not sure why this swindler is so important, which is why I thought of consulting you. Upon hearing this, Leonard fell silent. He understood Klein's subtle meaning. This swindler was related to the mastermind they were jointly opposing, so Klein didn't dare to act on his own and came to consult him. Due to the old man's reminder within him and Klein's hints during this period, Leonard had a certain understanding of the mastermind's characteristic of, whatever is said will be known. So, he had myriad doubts in his heart, but he couldn't voice them. What do you think of this swindler? Leonard tapped the armrest of the sofa with his finger, wanting to know Klein's thoughts. I don't have any specific ideas either, I just know this swindler is very important, but I have no one to consult, so I came to you. Moreover, it seems there's a problem with the mastermind, and they might be unable to intervene strongly recently. Klein also wanted to see how Leonard would react, so he directly revealed important information to push him. As expected, Leonard's eyes lit up when he heard this information. He didn't even want to pursue why Klein knew such information, feeling extremely excited. Allow me to think for a moment. I'll tell you my response as soon as possible. With Klein present, Leonard couldn't consult the old man inside him, so he could only send Klein away first. And Klein had already expected this, so he got up and left without any surprise. To be honest, he was now very much looking forward to the confrontation between the high-sequence power behind Leonard and the mastermind. After Klein left, Leonard impatiently whispered, Old man, did you hear? The mastermind themselves have a problem. Can we use this window of opportunity to resolve the Tingen matter in one go? After a long time, just as Leonard was starting to get a little impatient, an old voice finally came from his ear, I really don't want to get involved in such matters. If I had known there would be so many things in Tingen, you could have killed me, and I wouldn't have temporarily resided in you. Leonard gave an awkward smile, but at the same time, his heart was filled with relief. If it weren't for the old man's existence, he wouldn't even have been able to confirm that there was a mastermind behind Tingen. At that time, he wouldn't even know how he died. I cannot directly interfere in this matter. I encountered a powerful enemy and was severely injured, which is why I am hiding within you. Moreover, there are many things behind this that I dare not interfere with. How about this? You conduct the preliminary investigation first, and I will try to find a way to disrupt this script through normal means. Leonard nodded, agreeing with the old man's suggestion. Then, he hesitated for a moment and asked again, Old man, what are your thoughts on the secrets surrounding Klein? The voice fell silent again, and after a while, it spoke with a hint of doubt. To be honest, I am also very puzzled by the power behind him. I have made several conjectures, but they all feel somewhat off. Let's wait and see. At least he has been pushing to resolve the Tingen matter, so for you, he is currently someone you can cooperate with. Leonard nodded in agreement again. A wave of drowsiness hit him. Leonard looked at the clock in the living room and realized that since he arrived home this morning, he had only slept for less than 2 hours in total, which made him frantic. Who would have thought that a sleepless would one day suffer from sleep deprivation? Fortunately, this matter was not very urgent. He needed to catch up on sleep, otherwise he might become the first, sleepless, to die suddenly from lack of sleep. After Klein left Leonard's house, he decided to speed up his acting, so he boarded a public carriage again and headed towards the Seer Club in Howe Street. When Klein arrived at the Seer Club, he found that apart from Miss Angelica at the front desk, there was hardly anyone else in the entire club. Today was Sunday, so this phenomenon was not normal. Just as Klein was about to inquire, a lady wearing a blue long dress and a pink blue veiled hat walked in from outside the door, with a melancholic expression, and walked towards the front desk. "Hello, I would like a seer." Before Miss Angelica could speak, this lady stated her request first. Miss Angelica said with a troubled expression, "All the seers at the Seer Club are out today on business, only Mr. Moretti, who is beside you, did not go with them." Klein was full of questions. How did he not know that the Seer Club had a group activity today? Why was he excluded? Just as Klein was lost in thought, he saw the lady look at him again, so he quickly smiled and asked, "What would you like to have a seer for? What should I call you?" The woman saw Klein's young face and was clearly hesitant, but she also didn't want to make a wasted trip, as this matter had been weighing on her mind for a long time. "You can call me Anna. I want to have a seer about the current situation of my fiancé, is that possible?" "Of course. Let's find a quieter seer room." Klein valued his first customer very much, and then quickly winked at Miss Angelica. Miss Angelica pointed directly to a room and said, "The citrine room is very quiet and suitable for seer. Do you need coffee or tea?" "Black tea. X2. After letting Miss Anna enter the room first, Klein asked in a low voice, "Is the Seer Club having a team building event today? Why don't I know about it?" "Team building? Oh, it's not an activity organized by the club. It was temporarily organized by Mr. Grassi. He found a good investment project and recommended it to others. Everyone was very interested, so they all left with Mr. Grassi. You arrived a bit late today, so you didn't know." Miss Angelica heard the term, team building, for the first time, but quickly reacted and immediately understood what it meant. She quickly explained to Klein, because if the Seer Club had a team building event and did not notify individuals, it would be her responsibility. Investment. Everything Klein had done this morning revolved around investment, and now hearing investment again, his eyebrows couldn't help but twitch. Because he couldn't keep the guest waiting, Klein personally carried 2 cups of black tea into the citrine room, intending to send off his first guest before learning more about the related matters. Subsequently, Klein, with the information provided by the beautiful Miss Anna, quickly divined her fiancé's situation, making Miss Anna overjoyed. Looking at the one Soul in his hand, and then at the excitedly departing Miss Anna, Klein laughed wryly. But thinking of the scene of the Honekes mountain range throne he saw in the seer just now, he couldn't help but frown. However, unable to figure out the reason, Klein could only temporarily put it aside and left the citrine room. In the reception hall, Klein handed over 1/8, which was 2 pennies, as the club's share, with half a penny as a tip for Miss Angelica, and then asked, "What kind of investment opportunity is it that almost everyone in the club is tempted by?" "It seems to be an investment related to iron ore. I heard that Mr. Grassi has a friend who discovered iron ore in Silvis County, but they lack initial investment and cannot mine on a large scale. They are now looking for investors everywhere. When I went to deliver coffee and black tea to the seers, I found that everyone was very excited, and there seemed to be various documents and photos on the table. It really looked like a very good investment opportunity." Because she received Klein's tip, Miss Angelica explained in particular detail, her words full of regret. This kind of investment was simply not something ordinary wage earners could get involved in, and all the seers in the Seer Club were considered to have some assets, except Klein. When Klein heard Miss Angelica's introduction, he felt his teeth ache a bit. Silvis County, complete documents, photos, these sensitive keywords made him almost certain that the investment Mr. Grassi introduced was the same investment he had already determined to be a scam. Initially, Klein thought this scam was aimed at the upper echelons of Tingen society, but from the current situation, the scale of this scam was already very large, which couldn't help but alarm Klein. What exactly does the mastermind want to do? Klein was a bit indecisive and could only wait for Leonard's opinion. "Oh, by the way, tomorrow is Monday. At that time, I'll listen to Avon's opinion." This matter was within his expectations. Miss Angelica noticed Klein's fluctuating expression, thinking she had said something wrong, and asked somewhat at a loss. "You really don't need to regret it. This kind of investment cannot be decided in a short time. You definitely still have a chance. And you reminded Mr. Grassi to see a doctor as soon as possible last time, which saved his life. Mr. Grassi has said more than once that he wants to thank you in person, so if you are also interested in investing, he will definitely be willing to connect you." Klein shook his head and said with a frown, "This investment opportunity is not good. I have a feeling about it. I will be here all day today. If they come back, please let me know." After speaking, Klein turned and entered the lounge, preparing to wait for the next customer to arrive. Perhaps the seer effect for Miss Angelica was too good, so before Klein left the seer club, he also received her fiancée, Joyce Maya, who had an aquiline nose. And through dream interpretation, he learned about the Maltese merchant ship incident, keenly noticed the shadow of a Beander behind the tragedy, and reminded him to report it. Backland, Empress Borough, Monday. Avon woke up from his large bed again, feeling refreshed. Yesterday, Avon was busy all day. Robert had invited a large number of parliamentary members to his home to comprehensively explain the main content of the LotM Government Employee Recruitment Act, also known as the Robert Act, which he was preparing to strongly promote. Although this bill had already been approved by the Conservative Party's high-level members and a consensus had been reached, other members also needed to be won over and gain their support. To build greater consensus, Robert not only invited his Conservative Party colleagues but also some new party members. When members had objections to the bill's content, Robert and Avon had to explain and answer questions separately. After a day of effort, and after summarizing information from all sides last night, Robert was basically certain that this bill would become the most important bipartisan consensus bill this year, and it would definitely pass with over 70% of the approval votes. This would greatly boost Robert's political career and bring him immense prestige, and the longer the time, the better the bill's effect, and the higher Robert's political standing would be. Do not think that if Duke Nigan and Earl Hall promised him a position in the Conservative Party's high echelons, he would necessarily achieve it. As long as a slight flaw is revealed, it is as easy for politicians to break promises as eating and drinking, they do not care what they once said. To reward Avon, Robert transferred 100,000 acres of his land in Ahova County, valued at 30,000 gold pounds, to Avon's name. He also gifted a house in the West District, a house in the North District, an office building in the Hilton Borough, 2 apartments in the Sherwood Borough, and 10,000 gold pounds in cash. In total, Robert gifted nearly 70,000 to 80,000 gold pounds worth of assets to Avon this time, which deeply moved Avon. At first, Avon refused, thinking that these were properties under Earl Ahova's name and should not be moved without permission. After Robert's explanation, Avon learned that when Robert had just retired, he had already taken over the right to dispose of the properties under Earl Ahova's name from the Earl. In the few years before the grain bill was abolished, Robert sold most of the land under the Earl's name and invested in factories and banks, which brought him substantial profits. When the Loan Kingdom and the Fasak Empire were vying in the southern continent, Robert, relying on his military and political acumen, had long concluded that Loan could not win. After his advice proved fruitless, he decisively bought Forsak national bonds through black market channels and shorted Loan's import and export trading companies through banks, making a fortune in this war. The houses he gifted to Avon were actually left behind by bankrupt wealthy individuals engaged in import and export trade. Robert owned at least 7 or 8 such villas in the West District, and countless more in other districts. After listening to Robert's introduction, Avon sighed at Earl Ahova's trust and regard for Robert, having given him the right to dispose of property so early. At the same time, he also marveled at how easy it was to make money by being close to the center of power. According to Robert, under his management in recent years, he had at least doubled the assets under Erlahova's name, and Robert had full disposal rights over the newly added property, so gifting some assets to Avon was nothing. After hearing Robert's introduction, Avon no longer feigned refusal and directly accepted his brother's gift, as he would have many more places to spend money in the future. Today is Monday, and it is time for Avon to report to Military Intelligence Section 9. Military Intelligence Section 9's office building is located on Bellotto Street in the West District, a rather inconspicuous three-story building. There were no identifying marks outside the door to prove its identity, just a simple 9 hanging on the door. When Avon arrived, he found it difficult to distinguish this building from others outside. If Robert hadn't personally told him the address, he would never have guessed that this building housed the LotM Kingdom's most famous spy agency. Avon held the proof Robert had given him. The security personnel outside did not search him, but simply looked him up and down before letting him in. Upon entering, Avon saw people coming and going, with many clerical staff moving about. If not told, one might think this was an import and export trading company. After surveying the surroundings, Avon walked directly towards the receptionist at the front desk. "My name is Avon, and I have an appointment to see Deputy Director Jonas. Would you mind informing him?" The receptionist heard him, put down what she was doing, and looked up to see Avon with a charming smile. For a moment, she was stunned, until Avon reminded her again, and a colleague secretly poked her. She then came back to her senses and quickly said, "Please wait a moment, I will go inform him now." With that, she stumbled towards the interior, while Avon found a seat and waited patiently. During this time, another receptionist made him a cup of coffee, and Avon politely thanked her. Avon did not wait long. Just as he was drinking the excellent Earl coffee and inwardly complaining about Military Intelligence Section 9's lavish spending, the receptionist who had gone to inform him earlier ran back, telling him to go directly upstairs to the second office on the left on the third floor. After thanking the breathless receptionist, Avon drained his coffee, picked up his hat, and went up the stairs. When Avon arrived at the office door and saw the Jonas nameplate on it, he directly knocked on the door. "Knock, knock, knock. Please come in," a sweet female voice called out. Upon entering, Avon saw a beautiful blonde woman in military uniform sitting behind an office desk. After Avon stated his name, this lady let Avon in without asking for permission, as she had already been informed of Avon's situation. After thanking the secretary, Avon opened the adjacent door. Upon entering, he found that the deputy director's office was very large, easily over 100 square meters, with file cabinets all around, densely packed with many documents. In front of the file cabinets was a large desk, also covered with documents, and in the middle of these documents, a man with a severely receding hairline was diligently writing, swish, 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 correcting documents. Avon walked forward, about to greet him, but before he could speak, he heard Jonas say without even lifting his head, "No need for formalities. Your brother and I are old classmates. Please sit there and wait for a moment, I'll talk after I finish this document." Yes. Avon did not stand on ceremony with his future superior. He directly sat on the sofa in front of his desk and then looked around the office. Not long after, Jonas finished the documents at hand, took off his glasses, and looking at the vibrant Avon, he smiled and said, "I have heard Robert's introduction about you. I heard you voluntarily asked to join the military." "Yes, I have always wanted to emulate my brother, but he never agreed before," Avon said truthfully. "Excellent. A good man should join the army. Only men who have been tempered by the fires of war can truly be called men. It's a pity that many people have forgotten this truth now. Too many people have focused on high-paying jobs, especially in banking, securities, insurance, and stocks, forgetting that the foundation of the kingdom lies in the army." Jonas grumbled a few words because he had been very displeased with these matters in recent years. Knowing today that his friend's younger brother had voluntarily joined the army, and not viewing Avon as an outsider, he couldn't help but vent his frustrations. Avon could only listen but not respond. Some things could be responded to, but some truly could not be carelessly answered. Deputy Director Jonas complained a little about his dissatisfaction, then said kindly, "I highly approve of your active decision to join the army, and I am willing to provide you with more convenience. By the way, your brother didn't make it clear, which pathway did you choose? And what sequence are you now?" "I chose the Hunter pathway, and I am about to advance to sequence 8. Avon answered without hesitation. These were all things he had already considered before coming. The Assassin pathway and the Hunter pathway have many similar abilities at lower sequences, so even if Avon now reported to Military Intelligence Section 9 that he was of the Hunter pathway, it would not arouse suspicion from Military Intelligence Section 9 or the Demonist sect. The Hunter pathway. This is actually quite rare in the Loan Kingdom, but it's mainstream in the Intis Republic and the Fasak Empire. After all, the Sauron royal family and the Einhorn imperial family both held control of the Hunter pathway back then, causing us quite a few losses on the battlefield. However, this pathway is indeed very suitable for the army and will be very beneficial for your future development. After entering the army, it will also be of great help in your control of Beander characteristics," Jonas said with a sigh of emotion, and with an implied meaning. Avon's heart stirred. He wondered if Jonas also understood the role-playing method. He was a contemporary alumnus of Robert's military academy and a comrade who fought alongside him on the battlefield. So, despite his severely receding hairline and unusually seasoned appearance, he was actually similar in age to Robert. According to Avon, Military Intelligence Section 9 is an intelligence organization that possesses demigods and many powerful sealed artifacts. To be a deputy director, one should at least be sequence 5. To be so young and already have the potential to become a demigod, it's estimated that there are only a few in the entire Loan officialdom. Coupled with his surname, Augustus, it's possible he truly is a key cultivation target of the royal family. I currently serve as the Deputy Director of Military Intelligence Section 9 and the Deputy Head of the Domestic Security and Counter-Espionage Group, specifically handling matters related to the Backland area and the Fasak Empire, leading 3 Beander squads. Accepting your brother's request was actually a bit difficult for me, mainly because you haven't received professional training. Abruptly arranging a high position would cause dissatisfaction among those below. When I first retired and came to Military Intelligence Section 9, I immediately became the deputy head of the counter-espionage group, which also caused dissatisfaction among many people. It was only because I had military merits from the battlefield that no major incidents occurred, and it wasn't until I achieved several great merits in the past 2 years and was promoted to deputy director that I finally gained a firm footing. Jonas explained patiently to Avon. Avon had already anticipated all of this. Why should a newcomer with no achievements climb over others? Therefore, Avon understood Jonas's dilemma. I understand everything you've said. Since I've decided to take this path, encountering these difficulties is to be expected. I just don't know how you plan to arrange me. Jonas was very satisfied with Avon's attitude, and then began to tell Avon about his arrangements. You are currently sequence 9. According to regulations, as long as you join Military Intelligence Section 9, you can have the rank of lieutenant. As long as you have been employed for 1 year or you advance again, you can be granted the rank of captain. I have 3 positions here for you to choose from. One is to be my secretary, assisting me in handling daily affairs. This is an administrative position, which can help you quickly familiarize yourself with the affairs here, making it easier for you to carry out your work in the future. Another is for me to place you in a Beander squad below. The main task of these squads is currently to monitor the Fasak embassy in Backland, preventing them from stealing intelligence in Backland. The last option is for you to conceal your identity, find a normal profession in Backland, frequent various places, and gather various intelligence for Military Intelligence Section 9 in Backland, as well as expand Military Intelligence Section 9's intelligence sources. These types of members are often external members recruited by the section, such as bounty hunters. However, don't underestimate these types of external members. They can often gather information that is difficult for ordinary people to obtain, and they are very helpful for counter-espionage and maintaining backland stability. These are the only 3 positions I can offer you right now. You can also tell me any thoughts you have about your future work. Avon did not answer immediately, but instead thought for a long time. Seeing this, Jonas did not rush him, but instead picked up another document and continued to approve it. After a long while, Avon spoke again. I choose the 3rd option. I didn't join Military Intelligence Section 9 to loaf around or chase ranks. I also want to achieve some merits in Military Intelligence Section 9. Therefore, although I can learn a lot by your side and my life would be stable, it doesn't align with my original intention of joining Military Intelligence Section 9. As for joining a Beyonder squad and monitoring the Fasak embassy, that also doesn't meet my requirements. The kingdom has just suffered a defeat in the war against the Fasak Empire in the southern continent. The Fasak embassy should know that we are definitely keeping a close eye on them now, so continuing to monitor them won't yield much. Moreover, I think you're right. Doing intelligence work at the lower levels often yields unexpected intelligence. Plus, I'm a relatively free-spirited person, and I'm used to making my own decisions. I actually don't like being commanded, so I choose to become an intelligence officer who collects information. Jonas put down his pen and looked at Avon, smiling as he said. To be honest, your choice surprises me a bit. I originally thought you would choose to join a Beyonder squad. But it's good too, society is also a huge stage that can teach you many things. From today onwards, you are my exclusive intelligence officer. If you can gather important intelligence, you can report directly to me. At the same time, you also have the right to recruit external members. I will have Tracy introduce you to the specific matters and help you with the procedures. As Jonas spoke, he pressed the alarm bell on the desk, and the secretary who had been waiting outside the room for instructions walked in. Tracy, please help Avon with his onboarding procedures and explain the various situations in the section to him. After Jonas finished speaking, Avon saluted him and then left the office with the secretary. What should I call you, big sister? What are we going to do next? Avon's words were always sweet when he faced beautiful women, and this time was no exception. Miss Tracy, with her proud figure, golden hair, and blue eyes, was very happy to hear such a handsome man call her big sister. She smiled and said, I need to take you to onboard first and handle all sorts of procedures. Because you are considered a secret intelligence officer, we must first go to the underground confidential archives to fill out your file, then collect your identification, and even set up a corresponding bank account for you to receive your salary, and so on. There are many things to do. As she spoke, Tracy led Avon to an inconspicuous small door in an office cubicle, and at the same time handed Avon a golden mask. After Avon put it on, she opened the small door and led him inside. Upon entering, Avon found that there were people waiting inside. Only after Tracy produced a warrant was she able to continue leading Avon down the stairs. The stairs spiraled downwards, reaching deep underground. The surroundings were all concrete walls with no gaps, and there was no opening except for the small door through which Tracy had led him. This type of passage is specially opened for intelligence officers with very high security clearance. Only intelligence officers directly subordinate to the director and deputy director can enter. In the future, you will also need to use this passage to report your work. You cannot enter directly from the reception hall. Carefully descending the stairs, Miss Tracy explained to Avon. These spiraling stairs were indeed not very friendly to her, wearing high heels. Avon quickly helped her and at the same time asked, I heard that there are many sealed artifacts underground. Are they also connected to the outside world? Isn't that unsafe? Miss Tracy gave Avon a grateful look, then explained. Military Intelligence Section 9's underground is actually very vast, with a total of 3 levels. The lowest level seals those dangerous sealed artifacts. You cannot approach them without a warrant from the deputy director or higher. The second underground level is where various confidential archives are kept and prisoners are held. It is also where you secret intelligence officers enter and exit. It is connected to some rooms in the surrounding streets, so your comings and goings will not be discovered. The first underground level is the stationed area for the various Beander teams, rest rooms, card rooms, etc. Generally, the 3 underground levels basically do not interact with each other. The passages we are using now lead directly to the offices of the various directors and deputy directors on the 3rd floor above ground. The office staff you see above are all civilian personnel, the true Beyonders are stationed underground. For a real intelligence agency, the location of Military Intelligence Section 9 is not a secret. Therefore, whether intelligence officers are coming in or Beander teams are going out on missions, they cannot simply walk out the main door. They must all leave secretly through the underground passages. Avon understood. This was like an iceberg, only the tip was visible above water, while the true behemoth was hidden beneath. As she spoke, Miss Tracy had already led Avon to their destination. There was another door here, and a duty officer. Only after again presenting the warrant were they able to exit and enter the 2nd underground level. Watching the door close behind them, Miss Tracy whispered to Avon. These people guarding the passage doors are veterans of Military Intelligence Section 9. Do not be rude when you enter and exit in the future. Avon nodded and said, yes. In fact, even if she hadn't said anything, Avon wouldn't casually provoke anyone. Having read so many short stories in his previous life, Avon knew very well that these seemingly inconspicuous people might have been subordinates of some big shot back in the day, so how could he easily offend them? After giving Avon a warning, Miss Tracy led Avon along the dimly lit passage, illuminated by gas lamps, to a relatively spacious hall. Dozens of people were coming and going here, but without exception, they all wore golden masks and did not communicate with each other, each attending to their own business. Looking around, Avon saw rows of offices around the hall, including Logistics Department, Archives Department, Materials Department, Firearms Management Department, Communications Department, Finance Department, Human Resources Department, Medical Department, and so on. Avon even saw the words, Union. In short, it was extensive, tightly organized, and had everything. This also made Avon basically confirm that the buildings above ground were used by the high-ranking officials of Military Intelligence Section 9, along with some civilian personnel serving as a facade, while the main body of Military Intelligence Section 9 had always been underground. Miss Tracy did not hesitate and directly led Avon into the Archives Department, where the head of the Archives Department filled out the relevant information for him and had Avon drip a drop of blood onto the corresponding file and employment contract. The employment contract was basically the same as Klein's Nighthawk's employment contract, just slightly stricter. After signing the contract, Avon felt a binding force enveloping him. Avon, who had a connection with Mysterious City, could clearly feel the net wrapped around his body, making Avon understand that if he violated the contract, he would definitely suffer the most severe punishment. Afterward, Miss Tracy took Avon to the Human Resources Department for registration, and then to the General Affairs Department to collect his military uniform and corresponding identification. The military uniform and rank could only be kept at home and not worn. The identification he received was from the police department, meaning Avon would also have an additional identity as a police inspector. Of course, all names used were aliases, including the information filled out in the archives. Avon's real name file would be taken upstairs by Miss Tracy, then personally filled out and sealed by Deputy Director Jonas. After obtaining his identification, Avon was taken to the Firearms Management Department to receive a revolver and 20 demon hunting bullets. After all procedures were completed, Miss Tracy did not let Avon leave. She specifically found an empty room and explained some of Military Intelligence Section 9's rules to Avon. For example, he had to send an envelope to a certain place every day, and the content of the letter would be a complex symbol. Because the identity of an external intelligence officer was special and he didn't have to come to work every day, this method was used to report safety to home. The post office had special personnel to check these letters. Another example was the scope for Military Intelligence Section 9 to recruit peripheral personnel. Those who were genuinely valued and planned to be brought in later should ideally have a connection to nobility. Being a noble themselves would be even more perfect. If beyonders with hidden dangers, such as cultists of evil gods, were to be recruited, then whoever recruited them would ultimately be responsible. Avon could currently recruit 3 to 5 peripheral personnel. Military Intelligence Section 9 could provide them with a weekly stipend of £1 and also allow them to accumulate merit to exchange for magic potion formulas, magic potion materials, and even some mystical knowledge. Furthermore, for example, he was required to subscribe to Backland's most common newspaper, Backland Morning Post, every day. If Deputy Director Jonas had a mission to assign, it would be published in the newspaper using a code. If there was an urgent mission, a specific mark would be left for him in a corner of Central Park in the West District, and Avon had to go to Military Intelligence Section 9 immediately upon seeing it. Miss Tracy meticulously explained everything she needed to tell Avon, and even, fearing Avon might forget, had Avon repeat it back. Only after Avon repeated it accurately did she smile and say, "A few days ago, Counselor Robert came to ask for his younger brother to join Military Intelligence Section 9. I thought I would have a helper, but I didn't expect you to choose to become a secret intelligence officer. Thank you so much for your help today, big sister. I'll treat you to a meal sometime." Miss Tracy had been running around all morning today, working hard, so Avon was very grateful and spoke from the heart. Miss Tracy giggled, "All right, you're quite thoughtful. I'll be waiting to see what grand meal you treat me to." With that, she pulled out a box from somewhere and pushed it to Avon, saying, "Here, this is what Director Jonas instructed earlier. It's your benefit for joining Military Intelligence Section 9. Avon did not decline and directly opened the small box in front of Miss Tracy. He found a dark, almost black stone inside, its surface appearing to have liquid flowing over it, emitting a strong, foul odor. Without Miss Tracy needing to explain, Avon knew through spiritual attraction that this was a provoker Beander characteristic. The personnel recruited by Military Intelligence Section 9 are generally from noble families or have connections with nobles. They give up enjoying life and accept the constraints of confidentiality agreements mainly to embark on the Beander pathway. So, generally, when a new member joins, they can obtain a Sequence 9 magic potion formula without needing contribution points. Of course, they don't have to exchange it immediately, they can save up contribution points to directly obtain the corresponding pre-prepared magic potion. You were already on the Beander pathway before entering here. Plus with your brother's influence, Deputy Director Jonas is preparing a Sequence 8 Beander characteristic as a welcoming gift for you. Just now, when you were filling out the archives, I went to the storage room to retrieve this item. This is a war trophy of Deputy Director Jonas from the battlefield. It's a Beander characteristic of the Hunter Pathway's Sequence 8 Feet Provoker, roughly equivalent to the main ingredient of a magic potion. Oh, by the way, you know what a Beander characteristic is, right? Miss Tracy asked tentatively at the end. Of course, this isn't a secret in the Beander world outside. In fact, it's one of the most popular items in many underground trading markets. Avon felt that such mystical knowledge was not taboo, so he answered honestly. I didn't expect you, little brother, to be so young but to have participated in so many mystical gatherings. No wonder you want to become an intelligence officer instead of training with a Beander team. It seems you have a certain confidence in achieving special merits. Miss Tracy said with a meaningful look. Avon smiled noncommittally, neither admitting nor denying. After explaining everything, Miss Tracy took Avon to the entrance and exit from the second underground floor to the outside. What surprised Avon was that such a complex underground structure had only one entrance and exit. Many intelligence officers with golden masks were constantly entering and exiting through this single point. What kind of secrecy is this? Avon looked at Miss Tracy, puzzled. Miss Tracy seemed to know Avon's confusion, covered her mouth, chuckled twice, and then said, "It certainly looks like there's only one entrance and exit, but where each person exits is not the same, and the location is random. It only ensures that no one around can see you. That is to say, when you leave from here, you might arrive at the dirtiest toilet in the East Borough, or you might appear in the garden of a wealthy family in the West Borough. And when you receive an urgent contact signal, you find a secluded place, press your hand against a wall, and silently recite, Military Intelligence Section 9 feet 7 times in Ancient Forsac, then you will appear here. This effect applies to all areas of Backland except the Empress Borough and the major cathedrals. Military Intelligence Section 9 is said to possess this ability thanks to a grade 1 sealed artifact sealed underground. Aside from the passages from the surface buildings to the underground, this is the only way to enter the underground. And the surface buildings are where the high-ranking officials of Military Intelligence Section 9 work, so you understand. Avon quickly nodded. The only loophole in this underground base was the physical connection between the surface buildings and the underground base. However, this sole connection was collectively guarded by the high-ranking officials of Military Intelligence Section 9, making the possibility of enemies entering almost zero. All right, I've explained everything I needed to. You can leave now and try to figure out how to exit here. Just walk forward when you leave, don't be afraid, nothing will happen. Avon nodded, carrying the items he had received, and then walked resolutely towards the dim, lightless entrance and exit. As Avon reached the entrance and exit and stepped through, his vision suddenly changed. Reds became redder, yellows became yellower, blacks became blacker, various colors intensely overlapped, forming an oil painting of strange hues. Avon didn't think much of it. He stepped out, and the surrounding colors, like phantoms, quickly receded, bringing him to an area full of residential buildings. The good news was that this was a corner between several residential buildings, and no one saw Avon suddenly appear. The bad news was that the space here was too narrow. Even if Avon could get out, his formal suit, worth dozens of pounds, would be ruined by scraping against the surrounding walls. Fortunately, Avon still needed to experiment with how to enter Military Intelligence Section 9. So, he stayed put, placed his hand on the wall, concentrated, and silently recited, Military Intelligence Section 9 feet 7 times in Ancient Giant. Before Avon's eyes, the oil painting-like world reappeared. This time, Avon didn't even need to take a step. He appeared back at the previous entrance and exit. It seems you already know how to enter and exit here. Just as Avon was still looking around, Miss Tracy came to his side. Every intelligence officer who uses this function for the first time will test whether it's truly as magical as described. What was your first thought after learning that Military Intelligence Section 9 could be entered in this way? Avon answered without even thinking. Of course, if I encounter an enemy I can't defeat in the future, I'll use this method to escape. Hey, I'm relieved that you think that way. You from the Hunter pathway will become particularly hated after advancing to Sequence 8. Deputy Director Jonas's war trophies include many items related to hunters. So, if you have a way to earn contribution points, try your best to do so. There will always be rewards suitable for you. Alright, you've learned how to enter here, and my mission is complete. I need to report to the director, goodbye. With that, Miss Tracy left gracefully. After Miss Tracy left, Avon, just like before, left Military Intelligence Section 9 again. This time, he appeared in a restaurant's restroom. Fortunately, it wasn't the women's restroom, and the restaurant was of a certain class, so the restroom wasn't very dirty. Carrying a luggage bag that was very out of place with his attire, Avon left the restaurant under the puzzled gaze of the waiter. Looking around, he found himself in Hilton Borough, which housed the Backland Stock Exchange, Clearing House, Futures Center, various railway companies, and bulk cargo trading companies, and was known as the economic heart of the LotM Kingdom. Among the assets Robert gifted him was an office building located in Hilton Borough. This office building was left behind by a boss who primarily dealt in import and export trade between the North Continent and the South Continent, who went bankrupt due to war losses. Avon could collect 1,500 gold pounds in rent from this building annually. This was even due to the recent economic downturn in the LotM Kingdom. Otherwise, Avon could receive at least 2,000 pounds in rent annually. Avon was currently carrying a large luggage bag, making it inconvenient to inspect his office building. He looked up at the sky, which was filled with thick fog, and gave up trying to find the position of the sun. Opening the pure gold pocket watch hanging from his chest, he found it was already 1 p.m., and there were 2 hours until Mr. Fool's meeting time. At the same time, Avon felt a bit hungry, so he quickly hailed a carriage and headed towards Sherwood Borough, planning to have lunch there and also check out the 2 apartments Robert had given him. Upon arriving in Sherwood Borough, Avon first placed the military uniform and rank insignia he had received from Military Intelligence Section 9 in his apartment, then went to a nearby restaurant to eat something to fill his stomach. After finishing his meal, seeing that he still had time, Avon first went to another apartment to check it out, found it very suitable for rent, and decided to rent it out rather than leaving it idle. In fact, it wasn't just this apartment. Avon also planned to rent out another villa in the West Borough. As for the Sherwood Borough apartment from before, it would serve as Avon's residence after moving out of the Empress Borough villa. Avon had already explained this to Robert yesterday, and Robert, after much consideration, reluctantly agreed, but requested that Avon still return for dinner on Sundays. After inspecting his properties, Avon returned to his apartment to prepare the Rosel's diary he would present to Klein during their meeting. Meanwhile, Klein was also writing a letter on the mysterious Grey Fog Palace to be delivered to Avon through the Fool. In the letter, Klein meticulously detailed his experiences over the past few days, including his accidental encounter with Riel Bieber on the road at night. He mentioned discovering traces of fraud in Bieber's investments, and that he had entrusted the investigation of this matter to Leonard, also reminding Avon not to invest easily, wondering if this matter was orchestrated by the mastermind. To avoid missing any details, Klein also wrote about how he advised club colleagues to invest cautiously this morning, but was deemed too conservative, wondering if this matter would implicate too many people. He learned from Mr. Grassi that there was an apothecary in Tingen who could treat difficult and complicated diseases, wondering if this Beander would become a pawn of the mastermind, and if they should be dealt with in advance. He then wrote about successfully divining the condition of a lady's fiancé, and how that fiancé came to him again this morning, seeking divination for his terrible encounter at sea, and realizing that there was a Beander's shadow behind this case, wondering if the Beander behind this was related to the mastermind. Finally, Klein mentioned Mrs. Sharon, stating that he found Mrs. Sharon and himself to be people from completely different worlds, unable to establish any connection, and couldn't find any pretext to report her, asking Avon to find an excuse. Klein initially wanted to tentatively ask Avon if he knew about the Antigonus family treasure in the Honekes mountain range, but after thinking about it, the Fool might always be mistaken by Avon as an ancestor of the Antigonus family or Rosal, and such a question might arouse his suspicion, so he ultimately had to give up. Throughout the letter, Klein avoided directly asking the questions he wanted to ask, instead using a normal letter writing style to subtly inquire. After finishing the letter, Klein checked it again, memorizing its contents. He couldn't send the letter above the Grey Fog yet and would have to materialize it there, just like Miss Justice and the others. Klein knew that the Grey Fog was his biggest cheat, distinguishing him from other Beyonders, and could even help him, to a certain extent, escape the influence of the mastermind and break through his script, so he always wanted to develop the Grey Fog further. He had already designed an honorific name and ritual, and had experimented once, finding that it indeed could establish a connection with the Grey Fog. He planned to announce this ritual and honorific name at the Tarot Club in the future, allowing the Tarot Club members to experiment with it. Upon realizing it was exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Klein unhesitatingly dotted 3 familiar crimson stars. On a ghost ship sailing with the wind in the Sonia Sea, Alger stood ready in his captain's cabin. When the 3 pointers on the sextant clicked into their correct positions, a crimson color appeared in his eyes. In a beautiful bedroom in Backland's Empress Borough, Audrey leaned against a velvet pillow, observing herself being submerged in red light from a detached, overlooking perspective, her expression calm and serene. Avon, who had just finished writing Rosel's diary, sat on the leather sofa in his apartment, unsurprised to see his astral body once again being guided above the gray fog by the Fool's power, protected by the floating image of the mysterious city. When the three figures simultaneously appeared in the eternally unchanging, ancient and magnificent palace above the gray fog, Klein immediately noticed that the aura color of Justice, Audrey, who was previously the only non-Beander, had become integrated, pure and serene like a lake in a forest. "Congratulations, Miss Justice, you have become a Beander," Mr. Fool was the first to congratulate Audrey. After Audrey expressed her gratitude to Mr. Fool and Hanged Man in turn, Mr. Fool spoke again. "Have you found Rosal's diary during this period?" Under the scrutiny of the spectator, Hanged Man restrained his emotions and said that he had collected 2 pages of Rosal's diary. Audrey, on the other hand, stated that she had collected 1 page. The Strength, Avon, also stated that he had collected 2 pages of the diary. The 3 of them successively materialized the diary contents they had remembered, perfectly replicating them for Mr. Fool to read. Mr. Fool, Klein, learned from the diaries submitted by the 3 about Rosal's beginnings, his marriage, the pathway he chose, and that Rosal sailed on the ghost ship, Black Throne, which he discovered during an archaeological expedition, exploring the Fog Sea and finding a small island with many strange creatures. These diaries greatly helped Klein understand this fellow countryman he had never met, and the descriptions of potion digestion greatly enhanced his confidence in the summary of acting. When Klein continued to read the diary submitted by Avon, the content was about Mr. Door's description of the War of the 4 Emperors, which allowed Klein to learn many things not found in history books, understanding that deities could also go mad, the impact of the Pale disaster, and exactly which 4 emperors were involved in the War of the 4 Emperors. This made Klein couldn't help but marvel at the vast amount of information in these 2 pages, and also understood why the 4th epoch was called the Age of Gods in previous archaeological discoveries, as deities often descended to the world at that time. Not only that, Mr. Door also mentioned the 2 major laws of the Beander pathway. One is the law of indestructibility of Beander characteristics, and the other is the law of conservation of Beander characteristics within similar sequences. This also greatly benefited Klein, and he speculated whether there were similar pathways among the 7 Orthodox deities, and whether their historical conflicts, and the conflicts of the nations they supported, besides secular factors, might have arisen due to this law. Because he knew very little about the pathways possessed by other Orthodox churches, Klein couldn't come up with a clear explanation and could only decide to apply to the captain for some relevant mysticism materials after work tomorrow. Miss Justice Audrey felt that the Fool had been looking at the diary provided by the Strength for too long, and couldn't help but secretly glance at the Strength sitting diagonally across from her. 2 days ago, she had seen a handsome man at a dinner party at her home and felt that he looked familiar, but she couldn't recall where she had seen him before. With his looks, she definitely wouldn't forget him if she had seen him, especially since she had become a spectator, making it even more impossible to forget. In the end, she only learned from others' conversations that he was the brother of Councillor Robert, a famous political star. It wasn't until she ascended this mysterious palace again that she realized the man she felt looked familiar. His figure and appearance were actually very similar to the Strength, but because of the Fool's protection, they couldn't see the details of each other's appearance, only a blurry image, so she didn't connect them at first. Moreover, Avon in reality appeared more humble and polite, while the Strength in the Tarot Club was more arrogant. So, are they the same person or not? This should be the first time I've seen a Tarot Club member in reality, right? They should be the same person. I heard that the Government Employee Recruitment Act was strongly promoted by Councillor Robert, and the reform content is extremely similar to what I learned in the Grey Fog before. Perhaps the Strength is behind it. Including Mr. Fool, only 4 people knew about this act, and I hadn't even found a chance to promote it when it suddenly appeared. Should I find an opportunity to observe him again, or even test him? No, I can't. The Strength might be displeased. After all, we're not very familiar with each other and don't trust each other much, but I'm really curious. Audrey kept secretly glancing at the Strength, her mind filled with thoughts. And Miss Justice's glances at the strength naturally didn't escape the experienced Alger and Avon himself. The hanged man Alger immediately wondered if Justice and the strength had already met in real life, and then speculated whether the strength was also a Lonus. Avon was not surprised that Audrey recognized him, so he was mentally prepared and calmly faced Audrey's secret glances, even turning his head to smile slightly at her again. This made Audrey feel like she had been caught red-handed peeking at someone, her face feeling a bit hot, while at the same time, she basically confirmed that Avon was the man who had exchanged a smile with her and brushed past her at the dinner party, and he had already recognized her then. At this moment, the fool finished reading Rosal's diary, and Audrey eagerly looked forward to the day she could exchange for the contents of Rosal's diary from the fool. Avon, who was listening nearby, also chuckled to himself, "Don't end up exchanging for Rosal's diary about endlessly practicing piling and shouting about the taste of a demoness." Then, thinking of how he was once forced to know a man and go for it, he couldn't laugh anymore. Subsequently, Audrey once again asked the fool for details regarding the role-playing method. The fool, combining his summaries from this period, gave a brilliant answer that greatly benefited both Audrey and Alger. They both asked what they could offer in exchange for this explanation. At the same time, they both noticed that the strength, who was also listening to the fool's summary of the role-playing method, did not express gratitude for the fool's explanation like they did, and the fool also did not react to this, leading to various speculations in their minds. It seems that in the strength's eyes, Mr. Fool's explanation of the role-playing method is not beyond his understanding, so he believes he shouldn't pay the corresponding price, and Mr. Fool apparently acquiesced to this. What is the strength's true identity, to have such a deep understanding of the role-playing method? He is definitely not an ordinary Beander. As expected, Mr. Fool's choice of members always has profound meaning. Alger couldn't help but guess Avon's identity in his mind. According to Viscount Glaint, the strength has confirmed his joining Military Intelligence Section 9, and thus arrogantly refuses to participate in the young noble's circles, yet at the same time, he is well informed and knows many things about the mysterious world. From this perspective, the strength is not someone who relies solely on his brother's prestige, he must be a very capable person. His arrogance may not be the arrogance of a Beander towards ordinary people, it is very likely the arrogance of someone who deeply understands the role-playing method and is confident in going further on the Beander pathway. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to join the tarot club organized by Mr. Fool and learn about the role-playing method, otherwise, I might be considered nothing special in his eyes. The fool Klein, sitting at the head, naturally saw the hanged man and Justice's little actions of secretly looking at the strength, and partly guessed what they were thinking, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Avon taught me all my potion role-playing summaries. How can I have the nerve to ask him for payment? At the same time, the fool then put forward his own request. More of Rosal's diary or any information about the Antigonus family. Alger was silent, cautiously glanced at the fool sitting at the head, and carefully spoke. I know some information about the Antigonus family, which can be considered payment for your recent explanation. After the fool's nod, Alger looked around at the other two, then said. The Antigonus family is an ancient family, traceable back to the ancient Fourth Epoch, and is said to be related to the Second Blasphemy Slate. Then, with Audrey's cooperation, Alger spoke about the origin of the two blasphemy slates, and informed them that Emperor Rosal had once seen the Second Blasphemy Slate, even mentioning a series of names once prominent in the Fourth Epoch, and revealed the fact that the Antigonus family possessed the divinator pathway and was destroyed by the Night Church. These pieces of news caused the fool Klein a stir of alarm. It was a lost notebook from a secret order member who possessed the divinator pathway that brought Zhou Mingrui to this foreign world and caused the death of the original body. He chose the divinator pathway because of Emperor Rosal's notes. Riel Bieber, whom he coincidentally met, was also a descendant of the Antigonus family, who also possessed the divinator pathway. Even the church organization he joined was the culprit behind the destruction of the Antigonus family. This series of coincidences and events made Klein feel deeply connected to the divinator pathway and the fate of the Antigonus family, making him wonder if something was attracting these things to revolve around him. Finally, he cast his gaze upon the omnipresent gray fog around him. And just as Klein was suspecting a deep connection between the gray fog and the divinator pathway, Avon, who had been silent, chuckled softly and said, "All these families mentioned by the hanged man can be called angel families. The Antigonus family even possessed a great angel. Compared to the current Augustus family, the royal family of the Loan Kingdom, the Einhorn family, the imperial family of the Faesac Empire, the Castia family of the Phaenopater Kingdom, and the Sauron family, which was almost destroyed by Emperor Rosel's focused attacks, they were all junior to these families back then. From this, it can be seen that the Beander world is still a matter of, the survivor is king." Avon spoke in a relaxed tone, as if showing off terrifying information, even provocatively glancing at Alger, as if saying, "Is that all the information you know, and you dare to show it off?" This made Alger feel a surge of anger, but he was helpless. Both Klein and Audrey were simultaneously shocked by this news, because the word, angel, had only appeared in the Bible. They hadn't expected there to be angel families in the real world. But they quickly accepted this notion. After all, in the Loan Kingdom, the Augustus family had ruled as the royal family for over 1,000 years, which was already a very long time. After processing the information provided by Avon, Audrey posed her second question. "What are the subsequent potions of the spectator pathway called, and where can I find clues about them?" Alger cautiously glanced at Avon beside him. Seeing that Avon had no intention of interrupting, he then said, "I'll answer this question for free, because I was the one who led you down this pathway. Sequence 8 of the spectator pathway is called the telepathist, and sequence 7 is called the psychiatrist, also known as the psychoanalyst in ancient times." Just as Alger finished speaking and before he could catch his breath to continue, he heard the strength interject from beside him. Sequence 6 is called the hypnotist, and sequence 5 is called the dreamwalker. Avon's single sentence pushed Alger back into the air, instantly shattering his plan to build a generous image by freely giving information. Yet, he couldn't get angry, so he could only nod haphazardly in agreement. As a spectator, Audrey naturally saw Alger's displeasure, but she still thanked the two who had provided her with important additional information. The fool also noticed that Avon seemed to be deliberately provoking the hanged man's anger, and he too mused to himself, as this was not like the Avon he knew. Is he role-playing? But do assassins and hunters need to role-play this much? Then Audrey shyly posed her third question for the day. What happens if an ordinary animal drinks a sequence 9 potion? For a moment, silence filled the mysterious palace above the gray fog. Klein and Alger both looked at her with astonished eyes, and Audrey's face grew even redder, her head bowed even lower. Only Avon had expected this, his expression as usual, which made Audrey wonder if the strength had already discovered the fact that Susie had drunk the potion during the previous dinner. Oh, right, he cut a steak for Susie at the dinner before. Most people wouldn't care about a dog, he must have discovered something. Finally, Alger explained the concept of extraordinary creatures in an unclear tone. When Miss Justice Audrey and the hanged man Alger successively indicated that they had nothing to discuss, Avon spoke. "I'm looking to buy an agate peacock egg and all the blood of a black abyss murloc. I'm offering £800 for both materials, or equivalent value in information or materials. I will do my best to help you collect them," Audrey said solemnly. Whether it was the explanation of the role-playing method last time or the additional names of the subsequent potions of the spectator pathway this time, she had benefited greatly. Therefore, she was actually grateful to Avon and would certainly do her utmost to help him collect the materials. Although Alger disliked the strength's consistently arrogant demeanor, he wouldn't turn down money, so he also nodded, indicating that he would keep an eye out for Avon. Klein, seated at the head of the table as the fool, was somewhat astonished, because he could tell that Avon was preparing for future potions, and the price of these two materials could not be for sequence 8 potion materials, so it could only be for sequence 7. It seems that Avon has already collected the sequence 8 potions for the Hunter pathway and the Assassin pathway. That's right, he's joined so many secret organizations and is highly regarded. Obtaining the next sequence potion should be quite simple. It's just that he's starting to collect so early. On one hand, he might be worried that the corresponding materials will be difficult to gather and require time, or it's possible that he wants to bypass those secret organizations and secretly advance, leaving himself some trump cards. But this also indicates that his potion digestion process is going very smoothly, and it's only been a few days. Avon didn't know that Klein was analyzing his situation in his mind. He had originally wanted to post a task for the 2 main materials of the instigator potion as well. But he thought that the demonist sect might come knocking soon, and obtaining the potion from them would obviously be more legitimate, so he didn't speak again. As for the pyromaniac formula and materials, it was clear that Deputy Director Jonas would not be short of them. Obtaining rewards from one's boss or superior using merit can also make the superior trust you more and feel more at ease. After all, if a subordinate relies on their superior for nothing, the superior's heart would probably be uneasy. Then Klein proposed to conduct a ritual experiment, and Audrey and Avon's hearts were stirred by a storm when they heard the fool's honorific name. Because they clearly understood what a 3-part honorific name represented in mysticism, it represented a deity who overlooked the entire world. After these exchanges were completed, it was time for free communication among the members. It was still Miss Justice Audrey who initiated the conversation, stating that many people within the LotM kingdom had already approved of the separation of government and politics, and that the relevant proposal would soon be put to a vote in Parliament, and according to her understanding, the chances of it passing were very high. While Audrey was saying these things, she kept looking at Avon, intentionally or unintentionally, wanting to observe his reaction to this matter, but to her disappointment, Avon merely raised his chin slightly and made no further reaction. This matter clearly surprised Alger, because based on his impression of LotM's political scene, he felt that such a reform, involving so many layers, would definitely not take shape as a written proposal for several years. Even if a written proposal were formed, it would still require a long period of back and forth, consuming considerable resources and mutual compromise from all parties before it could finally be passed. But he didn't expect that in just 1 week, this reform had already been put into practice. This couldn't help but make Alger re-evaluate the role of the spectator. Can the spectator play such a significant role in promoting the development of events? Furthermore, he noticed that when Miss Justice spoke of this reform, she kept looking at the strength beside her, and the strength raised his chin, appearing exceptionally proud. Did this indicate that the strength was also strongly pushing this reform? This made Alger constantly evaluate in his mind the identity of the dislike the strength, why he was actively promoting this reform, and why he was able to promote it. And in his heart, he continuously elevated the importance he placed on the strength. Seeing that no one else had anything to share, Klein said, "If there's nothing else to share, then let's end here for today." Justice, the hanged man, and the strength all stood up together and bowed, saying, "Your will be done." Then Klein cut off his connection with Justice and the hanged man, leaving only Avon. At the same time, he conjured a letter in his hand and said, "This is a letter Klein wrote to you, entrusted to me to give to you. Read it now, then reply." Avon respectfully took the letter, bowed again, and said, "Thank you for your benevolence." After speaking, he sat down and opened the letter. Because Ince Zangwill was probably backlashed by the true creator's power these past few days, the content of Lord of the Mysteries, in Avon's mind hadn't changed much, and he was eager to know the development of the Tingen matter. Avon quickly read through Klein's letter and immediately understood the secret code within, feeling very relieved and pleased that the hidden preparations he had made earlier were starting to work. So, after requesting the fool's help, Avon once again materialized paper and pen and began writing a letter to Klein. In the letter, Avon warned Klein to be careful of Riel Bieber, and also to be wary of the Secret Order's magician who might track the notebook to Tingen, even specifically reminding Klein that the magician was a sequence 7 of the seer pathway, telling Klein to deal with him carefully. As for the investment situation, Avon expressed trust in Butler Buck, stating that as soon as Butler Buck's telegram about the investment arrived, he would quickly approve the investment plan, not even ruling out the possibility of increasing the investment. Avon was writing the letter above the gray fog, and Klein was essentially watching Avon's writing in real time, so when he saw Avon insist on continuing to invest in the iron mine, and even expand the investment, he couldn't help but frown. But before he could think too much, Avon wrote new content. Avon stated in the letter that even if Leonard re-examined this investment, the final recommendation would be consistent with his idea, and he believed that Klein should not stop those who wanted to invest. Avon even said with a deeper meaning that this was a necessary sacrifice, and to prevent Klein from being soft-hearted, he also reminded Klein to visit the Evil Dragon Bar, where there was a Beander of half a fate pathway who could provide him with some information. Then, regarding the apothecary that Klein unexpectedly discovered, Avon advised to be lenient where possible, as everyone experiences birth, old age, sickness, and death, and there might be a need for an apothecary at some point. If Klein was truly uneasy, Avon suggested that the apothecary could leave Tingen. As for the sea murder case that Klein specifically mentioned, Avon directly pointed out that it was done by an instigator, a sequence 8 of the assassin pathway, and that this instigator was very likely Mrs. Sharon's subordinate, boldly guessing that this instigator had probably finished digesting the magic potion and was about to advance to sequence 7, which this conclusion could be reached simply by understanding the role-playing method. As for Klein wanting him to fabricate a reason to report Mrs. Sharon, it was even easier for Avon to come up with one. Such a major sea murder case could not possibly escape the attention of the 3 major churches. If such a shocking case still went unnoticed, it would be a dereliction of duty by the Beander teams of the 3 major Orthodox churches. Therefore, it wouldn't be long before a wanted circular for the instigator would be issued everywhere. At that time, Klein would only need to fabricate a statement saying that someone saw the wanted criminal interacting with Mrs. Sharon, and a secret investigation could be conducted. And the items in Mrs. Sharon's room would definitely not be able to hide from the official Beyonders. At the end of the letter, Avon also specifically mentioned that Beyonders of the Seer pathway were always related to the Honekes mountain range, so he suggested that Klein visit the library more often and return to his alma mater to look for historical documents about the Honekes mountain range. After writing the letter, Avon symbolically asked Mr. Fool to help transfer it, then left the mysterious palace above the gray fog. Klein repeatedly read Avon's reply, carefully weighing every word and sentence, and finally put down the letter in his hand with a conflicted expression. He had understood Avon's meaning, which was to expand the swindler's scam, taking advantage of the mastermind being severely injured, to constantly refresh his script, making him overwhelmed, and ultimately seeing if this script could be destroyed, thereby saving Tingen. Klein himself felt that this approach was correct. The mastermind could only ever be the mastermind, only standing in the dark corners. Once the script spiraled out of control, he would either start a new script or cut off his losses like a gecko shedding its tail or a brave man severing his wrist, abandoning his goal. Regardless of the outcome, this would buy Klein valuable time. However, this would lead to a consequence. Many families would be left penniless and lose everything because of this scam. On Earth in his previous life, whenever such a scam occurred, desperate people could do anything. Klein truly couldn't bear to watch people step by step into the abyss, but the existence of the Tingen mastermind and the fate of Tingen put him in a dilemma, unsure of what to do. In the end, Klein did not make a final decision on what to do, only deciding to listen to Leonard's opinion tomorrow, hoping that Leonard could propose other solutions, although Klein also knew this possibility was very small. Avon specifically mentioned in the letter that members of the secret order had come to Tingen to search for the lost notebook, which indicated that Riel Bieber, who was carrying the notebook, should still be in Tingen. He already faced me last time, and he should also know that the Nighthawks searched his residence. Why would he still take such a big risk to stay in Tingen? Is there anything in Tingen worth him lingering for? Klein suddenly remembered that Riel Bieber's mother's body was still preserved in the police station's morgue. Could this be the reason he was lingering in Tingen? Whether it was or not, Klein was prepared to tell this conjecture to Captain Dunn. If handled properly, it might be possible to lure out the Secret Order's magician while apprehending Riel Bieber, killing two birds with one stone. This way, he might be able to simultaneously ask for both the Seer Sequence 8 and Sequence 7 magic potion formulas. Klein believed this was also why Avon specifically emphasized this matter, to give him a chance to obtain the corresponding formulas. After leaving the Grey Fog, Klein went directly to Blackthorn Security Company and told Captain Dunn his judgment about Riel Bieber's stay in Tingen, and proposed setting a trap to apprehend Riel Bieber. But he didn't expect Captain Dunn to just nod indifferently and then say, "No need. Tomorrow, a Nighthawk will arrive with a sealed artifact that can help us find Riel Bieber's whereabouts. The people from the Holy Cathedral have finally arrived." Klein couldn't help but grumble in his heart. Even Mr. Schumer has been in Tingen for 3 days, and they've only just arrived. Mr. Schumer was the person newly dispatched by the Holy Cathedral to Tingen to reinforce the Nighthawks team. As if seeing the grumbling in Klein's heart, Dunn added an explanation. This sealed artifact was previously on another mission. Its arrival tomorrow already indicates that they acted swiftly. Oh, by the way, I have a wanted circular to show you. The person wanted is also related to you. When I was invited by the machinery hive mind to assist in the investigation, I discovered in a dream that you prompted the victim to report the case. Me. Klein immediately remembered that he had performed a divination for a customer yesterday and urged him to report the case, not expecting the machinery hive mind's investigation speed to be so fast. Klein took the wanted poster from the captain's hand, and a sketch portrait came into view. The subject of the portrait had a round face, a friendly and shy demeanor, and looked quite young, around 18 or 19 years old. Triss, suspected instigator of Sequence 8, perpetrator of the Maltese tragedy. Witnesses confirm he arrived in Tingen City after disembarking at Enmad Port. His whereabouts are currently unknown. Looking at Triss's wanted poster, Klein couldn't help but lament that, assassins, truly understood, assassins, best. He had only briefly described the Maltese tragedy in his letter, and Avon immediately concluded that there was an instigator behind it. At the same time, Klein immediately realized this was an opportunity to expose Mrs. Sharon, so he almost blurted out without thinking. "I saw him today, yes, it was him. I saw him get into a carriage." Dunn Smith's deep gray eyes looked at Klein, and he asked seriously. "Where?" "Right at the entrance of the Seer Club. I went there again today to look for clues related to Hai Na Sen. Fan Sen Te, and I happened to run into him at the entrance." Klein said decisively, without blinking. "Do you know whose carriage he got into?" Dunn continued to inquire, not letting go of any detail. "I don't know, but I know it was a luxurious noble carriage with a noble crest engraved on it. If I see it, I can recognize it. Also, he was picked up by a beautiful lady, which left a deep impression on me." Actually, Klein knew where Mrs. Sharon lived, but he didn't dare to say too much, otherwise it might arouse suspicion. A beautiful lady. Dunn Smith did not delve deeper but directly got up, pulled out a large album from the bookshelf behind him, and asked Klein to identify it. Fortunately, there weren't many nobles in Tingen City, and even fewer who had inherited their titles over many years. Klein quickly found his target and pointed it out to Dunn. Dunn only glanced at it and said without any hesitation, "This is the crest of the Hoy family. They should currently reside in East Borough. We will go to the police station now to retrieve their information." Klein was surprised by the captain's improved memory, recognizing the crest at a glance. At the same time, he eagerly suggested, "Triss acts so maliciously and fearlessly, which indicates that there's a similarly wicked secret organization behind him. A noble member who can shelter a Sequence 8 Beander should hold a significant position within the secret organization, and their own sequence might not be low either. Should we make some preparations in advance?" Klein had known from Avon early on that Mrs. Sharon was a Sequence 6 Beander of the assassin pathway. He didn't want to rush in recklessly only to find out they couldn't win. One must know that the most powerful Nighthawk captain, Dunn Smith, was only a sequence 7 feet nightmare. Dunn Smith had already put on his coat and asked Klein solemnly. "What you said makes a lot of sense. Do you have any suggestions?" Klein had already thought of a preliminary plan in a flash, so he only pondered for a moment before saying directly. The victims of the Maltese tragedy were not only followers of the god of steam and machinery but also followers of the Evernight goddess and the storm god. They should also contribute to the capture of Triss. We can directly send telegrams to the Punisher Squad and the Machinery Hivemind Squad to request support. East Borough is the Punisher Squad's area of responsibility. Perhaps we can even get relevant information from them, saving us the trouble of going to the police station for data, which saves time. At the same time, if possible, please ask the Punisher Squad, after confirming the target's identity and locking down their location, to first monitor without alarming the target, then evacuate the surrounding populace urgently. After that, they should gather at least 5 cannons from the surrounding garrisons and directly flatten the target's hiding place, while we set up an ambush on the periphery. This way, the target will either be blown up in their hiding place or escape and be taken down by our ambush. Captain, how about it? Is this plan feasible? Dunn Smith was stunned, wondering what kind of thought process his subordinate had to come up with such a method. It should be feasible. Since the target lives in a high-end noble district, residing in a detached villa, this means the population density is low, allowing for good evacuation of people. As long as the target can be controlled for a short period, even servants can be evacuated. To be honest, Dunn Smith was accustomed to covert operations, using Beander powers and firearms, and had never considered this approach. Klein's suggestion seemed to open a new door to him, making him involuntarily lick his lips. He even felt a strange urge in his heart and turned to prepare to send a telegram to the Punisher Squad and the Machinery Hivemind Squad. By the way, Captain, when you send the telegram, make sure to tell the Punisher Squad to wait for us and emphasize that the target might be higher than Sequence 7, otherwise I'm worried they might handle it themselves since it's their jurisdiction. Klein knew that the Storm Church's Sequence 8 of the Sailor Pathway was the Folk of Rage, and he was truly afraid they would rush in recklessly. Dunn Smith savored Klein's words, nodded in agreement, and scrutinized Klein again from head to toe, then praised. You have the potential to become a Nighthawk captain. You consider things very comprehensively. Not only can you clearly formulate action plans, but you also understand your companion's strengths and weaknesses. If you can have an extraordinary talent in mastering Beander characteristics like Daly, perhaps you might have a chance to become a high-ranking official in the church in the future. Klein gave an awkward smile, not daring to say more. Although the Tarot Club I founded is small, it's already a standard secret organization. If I were to climb to a high position and be discovered by the Evernight goddess. Klein shivered inexplicably. Just as Captain Dunn went to send telegrams to his colleagues, Leonard appeared before Klein. He glanced at the hurried captain and asked in surprise. What happened? Klein explained the whole situation to Leonard, who looked at Klein with complex eyes. He would never believe that Klein had truly stumbled upon Triss and the Hoy family's carriage. Klein definitely had a plan all along and was just seizing the opportunity. But he wouldn't expose Klein, because after spending this time together, he still approved of Klein's character and was willing to maintain their previous understanding. Seeing Frey and Cohen Lee arrive one after another, making it inconvenient to talk, Leonard whispered to Klein. When this matter is over, let's find a place to talk about that investment fraud. After speaking, Leonard went to meet Frey and the others, re-explaining the situation to them. However, Klein's expression had already turned grim, because if Leonard were to report that swindler, he wouldn't have discussed it with Klein anymore, he would have just reported it directly to the captain. The fact that he wanted to specifically discuss it with Klein could only mean one thing. His proposed solution might be Avon's solution, and therefore he needed to persuade Klein. And this meant the ruin of many people's homes. Klein was in a bad mood, but he was about to face a Sequence 6 Beander, so he couldn't afford to be distracted. He could only suppress the matter in his heart and deal with it later. Just as Klein and the others were discussing the upcoming mission to encircle and kill a member of a hidden organization, Captain Dunn appeared before them again, carrying 2 sealed artifacts. One was a sealed artifact Klein was very familiar with, sealed artifact 30611, the Quiet Hair. The other was a dark golden badge with the symbolic sun engraved on it, with sections of lines extending to the edge. This is sealed artifact 30782, from the Intis Republic. Its name is Mutated Sun Badge. It can continuously purify corpses and ghosts within a 15-meter radius. The downside is that it can also purify normal people. A normal person staying within 15 meters of it for an hour will become an idiot who only knows how to praise the sun. The limit for a Beander is 6 hours. The reason I chose this sealed artifact is actually to leverage the characteristics of the sun pathway, because the sequence 7 of Triss's pathway is recorded in the data as possibly being very good at curses, and the power of the sun pathway can effectively counter curses. Hearing the captain's words, Klein recalled what Avon had previously revealed to him. The sequence 7 of the assassin pathway was called Witch. Thinking of Witch, wasn't it said in legends that they were good at curses? Of course, they're also good at shapeshifting. Klein couldn't help but mutter to himself, and at the same time, he couldn't help but imagine what Avon would look like if he transformed into a woman. Unconsciously, his expression became strange. Because he merely used his past life's experience to feminize Avon's face in his mind a little, and found that the feminized Avon was unexpectedly good-looking. This made Klein shiver involuntarily, making him question his own orientation. And just as Klein's thoughts were starting to drift, Captain Dunn continued. To be safe, no one should hold this badge for more than 2 hours. I'll hold it first, and when we reach East Borough, I plan to let Klein hold it, while the Quiet Hair will still be managed by Leonard. Although Dunn Smith didn't explicitly say it, everyone understood that Klein was the weakest in terms of combat ability among everyone, and also the most likely to be cursed, while Leonard was the strongest besides the captain, making him the most suitable to hold the Quiet Hair. At this moment, Mr. Schumer, the mystery prior sent by the church, walked over with several papers and handed them to Captain Dunn, saying, "These are the materials sent by the Punisher Squad through a ritual. They include not only information on the Hoy family but also sketches of its members." Dunn Smith took them, glanced through them, and then directly showed them to Klein, asking, "Is it her?" Klein only glanced at it and saw a vivid sketch of Mrs. Sharon on it. Then, without hesitation, he said firmly and decisively, "It's her." "Good, the Punisher Squad has confirmed she is in her villa at home. Without further delay, we will depart now. Mr. Schumer, please stay here and watch the house." Dunn Smith returned the documents to Mr. Schumer as he spoke. Actually, if a mysticism expert was needed, the experienced mystery prior Mr. Schumer was clearly the better choice, but Klein had not yet completed his entry mission and was not an official member, so he might not be able to handle the sealed artifacts behind the Chinese gate. In the end, Dunn chose to let Mr. Schumer stay and watch the house. And Mr. Schumer clearly recognized this point and nodded in agreement. When the Nighthawks arrived at Ulcerna Street in Tingen's East Borough, they found that the area had already been cordoned off by the Punisher Squad. Seeing Captain Gauss of the Punisher Squad, Dunn directly asked, "How is it? Did the target not notice your movements?" "No, we used a sealed artifact to directly isolate that house from the outside world. The people inside won't perceive any activity here." Captain Gauss pointed to the distant house, explaining with suppressed anger. The presence of at least a Sequence 7 Beander in his jurisdiction, who had been lurking under his nose for a long time, made him, a devout believer of the Lord of Storms, unable to forgive himself. Dunn Smith did not comfort him. Seeing the belated machinery Hivemind squad, he then informed the 2 captains of the plan proposed by Klein, and quickly gained their approval. Although they didn't know how strong their opponent was, they were basically certain that Mrs. Sharon was at least Sequence 7. Beyonders of this level were already very dangerous. A single mistake could allow her to escape, or even lead to a backlash, causing harm to their team members. They were captains and could not ignore existing risks for the sake of completing a mission, so they would certainly adopt a better and safer method if available. Captain Leo of the Machinery Hivemind Squad even unslung the eye-catching long-barreled, big sprayer, from his back and said, "No need for such trouble. I specifically brought it this time. This is our trump card. Even bringing 3 cannons wouldn't be as effective as firing a single shot from this." Looking at the thick gun barrel in Captain Leo's hands, which 2 hands couldn't even grasp, nearly 1.5 meters long, with its cold metallic luster, complex yet aesthetically pleasing mechanical parts, and the occasional burst of hot steam from its tail, no one doubted the power of this gun. Even Klein's eyes lit up as he looked at this weapon characteristic of the steam age, wishing he could get his hands on it and play with it. In his previous life, Klein had only seen rifles, he had never handled one. After transmigrating, he had only encountered short guns like revolvers. So, this steam rifle, combining both aesthetic appeal and power, immediately caught Klein's eye. HMPH. Captain Gauss noticed that everyone, including his own team members, was attracted by the steam rifle. He couldn't help but let out a cold snort and then said, "Earlier, I already used various methods to lure out the ordinary people in the villa. The servants around Mrs. Sharon have been confirmed by our team's mysticism expert to be cultists of an evil god. In a moment, I will remove the sealed artifact that isolates the house. Captain Dunn will attempt to control Mrs. Sharon, and Leo, you are responsible for opening fire. Remember to fire 2 more shots, as the church describes the instigator's higher sequences as being very skilled at doppelganger-type spells." Understood. Captain Leo expressed his agreement, and Dunn also had no objections. Seeing that neither Dunn Smith nor Leo questioned his leadership, Gauss then instructed all the other team members. "If Captain Leo's steam gun doesn't take down the opponent, then those with offensive sealed artifacts will follow the 3 of us in, and the rest will surround the outside." As he said this, Captain Gauss specifically glanced at Klein, who was holding the Sun badge, and noticed that his physical fitness was particularly weak, which made him basically understand that the sealed artifact in his hand should be for protection. And Dunn Smith, hearing Captain Gauss's arrangements, hesitated to speak but ultimately said nothing, because this was the Punisher's jurisdiction, and everyone tacitly agreed to his unified command. Actually, ever since Mrs. Sharon was reported by Klein and her identity exposed, her fate was already sealed. A Beander of Sequence 6, no matter what, could not contend with 3 fully armed church Beander teams, not to mention that the 3 major churches had brought a considerable number of sealed artifacts. It wasn't until Captain Gauss removed the sealed artifact isolating the house, and Captain Leo fired 3 bullets in quick succession with his mystical steam spear, that she was startled to realize she had been heavily surrounded. Mrs. Sharon reacted quickly. At the moment the mirror in the bedroom shattered in warning, and her spiritual premonition reached its peak, even Dunn Smith failed to pull her into a dream, as she directly broke free from the dream, and her first reaction after breaking free was to open the safe and take out the treasured primordial demoness statue. But it was all too late. Captain Leo's 3 shots were like 3 flashbangs, piercing the sky, and in just the blink of an eye, the Hoyt family mansion was directly reduced to ruins. However, a witch truly lives up to being one of the most difficult sequences to kill. In a critical moment, Mrs. Sharon successively used 2 substitution spells, the staff substitution method and the mirror substitution method. Originally, she could have used the mirror substitution method multiple times, but Captain Leo's gun was simply too powerful. After she used the first mirror substitution method and dodged the first bullet, all the mirrors and glass in the house had already shattered, and then she used the staff substitution method to evade the damage from the second bullet. When facing the third bullet, she could only emit black flames all over her body, and then condense thick frost outside the flames, as if she wanted to turn into a freezer and wrap herself, finally using her most skilled and favorite invisible spider silk, layer upon layer, allowing people to clearly see the appearance of the spider silk, finally forming a huge cocoon to resist the most fatal third bullet. When the third bullet exploded, Captain Gauss took the lead, rushing forward like a wild ox, followed closely by Captain Dunn, Leonard, and some other members carrying sealed artifacts. Mrs. Sharon, having just escaped danger, was pale and extremely weak, but still tried hard to save herself, becoming invisible under everyone's watchful eyes. Then, a member of the Punisher squad suddenly took out a palm-sized golden mirror from his embrace, and with a wave of his hand, under the blessing of the still setting sun, a soft white light appeared throughout the entire area, revealing everyone's whereabouts. Captain Gauss found Mrs. Sharon's location, pushed off with his feet, and in an instant rushed to her front. His sandbag-sized fist, with a sound of breaking air, struck her body hard. Mrs. Sharon was instantly gravely injured, spitting out a large mouthful of blood into the air, which splattered onto several people nearby, yet the gravely injured Mrs. Sharon was muttering something. Captain Gauss of the Punishers, seeing this situation, his expression changed, and he was about to speak, when Mrs. Sharon's mouth stopped moving. At the same time, the blood splattered on their bodies seemed to turn into sulfuric acid, hissing and smoking as it corroded their bodies, causing the Punishers to cry out in agony. Taking this opportunity, Mrs. Sharon used spider silk to entangle the Punisher squad member who was using the mirror-sealed artifact, and with a fierce pull, she dragged the team member over. And just as Mrs. Sharon, with a fierce expression, her slender right hand shaped into a claw, reached for that team member's throat, preparing to take him hostage, a soft strand of quiet hair fell onto her shoulder, instantly making her feel a wave of drowsiness, her eyes involuntarily closing gradually, and the movements of her hand also slowed down. It turned out that when that Punisher squad member was entangled by the spider silk, Leonard flew up, and from above, directly threw sealed artifact 30611, the quiet hair, towards Mrs. Sharon. And Leonard's luck was very good, there was no wind today, so it directly landed on her shoulder, touching Mrs. Sharon's neck, and just then, Captain Dunn's demon-hunting bullet arrived as expected. Mrs. Sharon's spider silk was still wrapped around the Punisher squad member. As long as she willed it, she could instantly cut the hostage into several pieces, so Dunsmith dared not gamble how long the quiet hair could control Mrs. Sharon, nor did he dare gamble that his dream pulling could control her. Only by threatening her life, forcing Mrs. Sharon to urgently defend herself, without time to kill the hostage, without time to become invisible, without time to unleash the power of frost, with only enough time to use the fastest defensive spider silk, could this team member be saved. Indeed, the threat of death from the demon-hunting bullet aimed directly at her head instantly sobered Mrs. Sharon. She shook off the quiet hair from her shoulder and, disregarding everything, wrapped spider silk around herself to resist the fatal demon-hunting bullet. A bloody mark appeared on Mrs. Sharon's brow, but it seemed to be nothing more than that. The bullet also seemed to have run out of power and fell to the ground, but closely following the first bullet were 3 more demon-hunting bullets, as well as 2 other bullets that sealed off any space she might evade into. Dunsmith almost instantly emptied all 6 bullets from his revolver, his gun speed terrifyingly fast and accurate. 1 demon-hunting bullet broke through Mrs. Sharon's spider silk defense, and 3 bullets followed the trajectory of the first, hitting the same spot, almost simultaneously penetrating Mrs. Sharon's beautiful face, turning this socialite famous in Tingnan, a Sequence 6 powerhouse, into a nightmarish shattered skull corpse, with gruesome pale skull fragments and fresh red minced flesh scattered within 3 meters around her. And only then did the attacks from the other Punishers holding sealed artifacts and the machinery hivemind team members arrive belatedly, landing on Mrs. Sharon's corpse. Seeing this scene, Captain Gauss's eyes turned red. Disregarding his teammates who had just been injured by Mrs. Sharon's blood curse, he immediately cursed. "Didn't you see that Captain Dunn has already killed the target? If you do this, how can we conduct a seance?" It turned out that one of the sealed artifacts in his team member's hand directly affected the soul. Being hit by this sealed artifact would severely impact the seance effect. Dunsmith and Captain Leo, who had just arrived, also frowned deeply. They had worked together and had seen this sealed artifact, but in the end, they still called Klein over, treating a dead horse as if it were alive by letting Klein, seance, and the other two captains had no objections, as they also knew that a seer was the most suitable for this task. Klein had long been waiting for this opportunity. He handed the mutated sun emblem to Frey, ran directly to Mrs. Sharon's corpse, endured the nauseating urge to vomit, quickly took out the prepared items, set up the altar, and began the seance. Where is Triss? Where is Triss? Everyone had witnessed that Triss was not with Mrs. Sharon, so Klein's first question upon entering the dream was this one. In the dream, Klein indeed found Mrs. Sharon's spirit to be abnormally thin. An ordinary Beander might not have been able to complete the seance, so he dared not hesitate in the slightest, reaching out to touch Mrs. Sharon's spirit, and learned that Triss was hiding in an apartment on Iron Cross Street in the West District, and would meet him in the Docklands that night. After answering this question, Mrs. Sharon's spirit completely dissipated. Klein informed the three captains of Triss's hiding place and his meeting point with Mrs. Sharon. Dunsmith glanced at the setting sun and said, Triss might be hiding in the apartment now, or he might have left for the Docklands early, so we need people to go to both places. The commotion here is too great and needs the Punishers to clean up. The West District is the Nighthawks' jurisdiction, so I'll go there. The Docklands will trouble Captain Leo. Captain Leo of the Machinery Hivemind did not respond, but looked at Captain Gauss. Captain Gauss's expression was not good, because the Docklands was also under the jurisdiction of the Punisher Squad, but he had just failed to formulate a strict plan, which allowed Mrs. Sharon to take advantage and caused injuries to the squad members. If it hadn't been for Leonard and Dunsmith's rich experience and decisive handling, the Punisher Squad member holding the mirror-type sealed artifact might have been taken hostage or even killed. Therefore, after the operation to kill Mrs. Sharon, he naturally would not be recognized by everyone as the supreme commander of the joint operation. Captain Leo of the Machinery Hivemind was still looking at his reaction only to save face. In reality, he would no longer recognize his command. Finally, Captain Gauss looked at his injured team members and nodded in agreement with Dunsmith's arrangements. Because the Punisher Squad's mysticism expert was injured, Dunsmith left Klein to help deal with the scene, and then led the others to the West District to search for Triss. Due to the great commotion, many members of the Punisher Squad participated in blocking the surrounding crowd and treating their teammates. Klein, on the other hand, walked to the destroyed house, searching for possible clues. As he used his spirituality to search for possible clues, his foot touched an iron box that had miraculously survived the explosion. The entire exterior of the iron box was somewhat melted by the fire, but it was still clear that the interior was undamaged. Klein simply divined with his crystal pendulum, confirmed there was no danger, and with a gentle flick, opened the iron box to find a black egg the size of a chicken egg inside, adorned with mysterious and complex green patterns, appearing unusually enchanting. Klein quickly realized that this might be the agate peacock egg Avon was looking for, because he knew that Avon was a dual pathway Beander, and the materials he was looking for were very likely Hunter pathway and Assassin pathway advancement materials. And Mrs. Sharon was a Sequence 6 powerhouse of the Assassin pathway, so it was normal for her to have materials from the Assassin pathway. Klein secretly glanced at the other Punishers around him, finding that many of them were attracted by the Beander characteristic precipitated from Mrs. Sharon, so he quickly hid it in the pocket of his clothes, then put a drawing Avon had given him into it, closed the lid, tucked it into the broken bricks and tiles, and quickly turned to search for clues elsewhere. Soon, someone found the iron box Klein had discarded. After easily opening it, they found a folded piece of paper inside, on which was drawn a Q-version portrait with a large head and a small body. The little figure in the portrait was flipping its large eyes downwards with its hand, sticking out its tongue, and a striking Z was drawn on its small body. Next to it was a sentence that read, "Thank you for helping me get rid of Mrs. Sharon. You've really worked hard. I'd love to meet you in person to thank you, but can you find me?" Anyone could see the provocative meaning of this drawing, and also that there was something fishy about this encirclement of Mrs. Sharon. So this Punisher member eagerly called out to his captain. Captain Gauss, after taking the drawing, naturally understood its meaning, and felt his anger rise sharply, also directly shouting, "All mysticism experts, come over and see if you can find any clues." Klein was the first to run over, and after some fuss, he solemnly said, "This drawing has been anti-divined, so no limited information can be obtained." Klein wasn't afraid of anyone investigating this drawing, because he had drawn it on the gray fog. As expected, none of the mysticism experts found any results. After the on-site investigation, Klein followed the Punishers to a nearby luxury hotel to dine and await news from the other two squads. The Punisher squad directly requisitioned an entire floor of rooms for its members to rest, and Klein was also given a separate room. After Klein had dined on the first floor of the hotel and become familiar with several Punisher members, Dunsmith and Captain Leo of the Machinery Hivemind finally arrived at the hotel with their teams. "Didn't you see Triss?" Captain Gauss stepped forward directly, asking eagerly. "We saw him," Captain Leo replied directly. "But we didn't catch him. Someone saved Chris. The person was skilled in flesh and blood magic and should be Rose Bishop, a sequence 6 of the Blood Path pathway." Rose Bishop. Captain Gauss's eyes widened. The Aurora Order and the Storm Church were mortal enemies, so his reaction was very strong. Then Captain Gauss quickly thought of the drawing his team member found in the ruins of Mrs. Sharon's villa, took it out, and handed it to the two captains, saying, "If it truly was Rose Bishop of the Aurora Order who saved Triss, then this drawing we found in the villa ruins indicates that we were used by the Aurora Order. It should have been Mr. Z of the Aurora Order who did it." Dunsmith and Captain Leo also took the drawing and looked at it, feeling provoked simultaneously, and nodded in agreement with Captain Gauss's analysis. "I didn't expect the infighting among secret organizations to be so severe. But why did he save Triss? Or was his goal in guiding us to eliminate Mrs. Sharon actually Triss?" Dunsmith was very confused about Mr. Z's purpose. No matter what Mr. Z's purpose is, we need to re-examine the entire Maltese tragedy and the issues surrounding Mrs. Sharon. She was a famous socialite in Tingen's high society, and who knows how many important figures are involved. We need to investigate them one by one. Captain Leo's words resonated deeply with Captain Gauss and Dunsmith. "However, I believe we should first investigate Mr. Z. After all, a Sequence 6 cultist not under our control is too dangerous for Tingen. Captain Dunn, please investigate the source of information regarding Mrs. Sharon's meeting with Triss. Perhaps you can find clues about Mr. Z." Dunsmith nodded, arranged for the other team members to eat first, and then went to find Klein to understand the situation. When Klein left that highly sarcastic drawing for Avon, he guessed that the captain would come to him, so he had already prepared a set of explanations to make the captain believe that he had truly seen Mrs. Sharon by chance. Dunsmith repeatedly verified it, found no loopholes, and then left. "It's going on sale today, and this book ultimately didn't reach the minimum expectation of 3,000 collections before going on sale. It would be a lie to say I'm not disappointed, but what's comforting is that it's a bit better than my previous book, which didn't even reach 3,000 collections by the time it was finished. Lord of the Mysteries was my first fully subscribed book on Kedian. Before that, I was a pirated reader, and it was because of Lord of the Mysteries that I officially became a paid legitimate reader, so he had a great influence on me. I've wanted to write a fanfiction for Lord of the Mysteries for a long time, but for various reasons, I never started. Even when I decided to write a Lord of the Mysteries fanfiction, I first wrote a Coiling Dragon fanfiction to practice. Although my last book didn't do well, it gave me the confidence to write a long series. Regarding this book, some readers have pointed out that there is too much of Klein's storyline, even starting to overshadow the protagonist. This is mainly due to Avon's deepening influence on the Tingen plot, and the beginning of many plots originated from Tingen, which I feel cannot be skipped, such as Triss. At the same time, I also wanted to save the Nighthawks team in Tingen, so the plot design is unreasonable, and I myself feel very awkward looking at it. Of course, I can also briefly mention these. I don't know what you all think, so feel free to leave a comment and share your views. My biggest goal now is to have 500 average subscriptions after the 3-month new book period so that I can continue to receive my full attendance bonus and keep writing. I'm not a great author, and it's really hard to write without the full attendance bonus. I hope for everyone's support. Finally, I ask for continued reading, collections, recommendations, monthly passes, and subscriptions. Your support is my biggest motivation for writing. Chapter 72 Triss and Mr. Z. Enmat Port, an abandoned warehouse. Triss paced back and forth with a solemn expression, wanting to leave several times but ultimately giving up, not daring to make any move. Tonight, he was supposed to meet his superior to receive his reward for completing the mission, the magic potion formula for the Assassin Pathway Sequence 7, along with 3 main ingredients. Following the caution of an assassin, he left his hiding place early and arrived at the meeting point. This caution saved his life, as he encountered a fully armed machinery hivemind team. If it weren't for a powerful Beander coming to his rescue, he would have had no chance of escaping. After the Beander, who looked like a magazine model, brought him to this abandoned warehouse, she merely instructed him, "Don't leave," and then hurried away. Triss still hadn't figured out how he was exposed, because he had only just arrived in Tingen today and had just sent the meeting signal through the Tingen honest people. How did the machinery hivemind team find him? Could it be that his superior in the demonist sect was arrested or killed, exposing him? How could that be possible? Although his sequence was not high, he knew his superior was very powerful. How could she be easily captured, especially at this critical juncture? She should have waited until I got the corresponding formula and materials before anything happened. Now, not only have I not received what I'm owed and can't advance, but I also don't know how to contact the organization in the future. Triss scratched his head in frustration. His problems didn't stop there. The biggest problem he faced now was who the mysterious person who saved him was, whether they were friend or foe, and what their purpose was. Because he couldn't even figure this out, he didn't know whether he should secretly leave this abandoned warehouse. He wasn't even sure if anyone was monitoring him. Just as Triss was lost in thought, the handsome, golden-haired, black-eyed, powerful, and charming young man reappeared before him, took out a sketch, and said, "Is she the person you were supposed to meet in Tingen this time?" Triss's pupils constricted when he saw the sketch, but he didn't answer the question. However, whether he answered or not was no longer important, because the young man had already figured it out. Placing the sketch on a dusty large wooden box, the young man spoke again. "I have no ill will. Let me introduce myself. You can call me Mr. Z." Hearing Mr. Z's self-introduction, Triss's heart trembled even more, and the dagger hidden in his sleeve tightened in his grip, raising his vigilance to the extreme. Because the Aurora Order's name was truly famous in the Beander world. Other secret organizations generally operated in secrecy, but the Aurora Order wished to operate in broad daylight, repeatedly confronting the Orthodox churches head-on, yet somehow had not been destroyed. Moreover, this group of people was crazy enough that no one could control them when they went mad, and even other secret organizations were unwilling to associate with them. Facing the wary Triss, Mr. Z still said kindly, "The reason I could save you is because of God's revelation. The great Creator foretold the arrival of the first one, so I noticed you from the moment you disembarked at Enmat Port. I followed you all the way to Tingen, which is why I saved your life when you encountered danger. I originally didn't know why the Creator wanted me to pay special attention to you, but when I learned from the Lord's Lamb at the police station that your superior had been eliminated, I realized that you would be the perfect candidate to infiltrate the demonist sect. Perhaps you could become a high-ranking member of the demonist sect, allowing the demonist sect to be used by the Lord." Just as Mr. Z was expounding at length on the Creator's greatness and his future arrangements for Triss suddenly interrupted. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Z, I am very grateful for saving my life, and I am willing to work for you, but what I want to say is that I am from Theosophy Order, which is just a subordinate organization of the demonist sect. It's impossible for me to enter the demonist sect, and all the high-ranking members of the demonist sect are women. They won't accept me." Triss hadn't finished speaking when Mr. Z couldn't help but burst into laughter. A group of demonists established Theosophy Order, building it into a facade for the demonist sect, attributing everything they did to the demonist sect. And the demonist sect also went with the flow, recruiting members under the name of Theosophy Order. It's truly interesting, ha 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 ha. Triss was stunned by the immense amount of information, and it was a while before he stammered. The Theosophy Order I joined has actually always been the demonist sect. Not Theosophy Order. But why would the demonist sect recruit a man like me? Mr. Z looked at Triss with pity and said with a sigh. Because the name of the Assassin Pathway Sequence 7 is, which is also why all high-ranking members of the demonist sect are women. Triss's mouth hung open, as if struck by lightning, unable to close it for a long time. Just as Mrs. Sharon of Tingen was killed, and Triss became a stray dog saved by Mr. Z, Avon had just finished his weeding activity. After attending the tarot club hosted by Mr. Fool in the afternoon, Avon originally wanted to go to Rose Street in the Backland Bridge district to see how Furs and Zio's surveillance work was going, and whether the plan he came up with for them, substituting the plum for the peach, and making the fake seem real, would work. But just as Avon was about to go out, he saw the newspaper that the newsboy delivered on time every day. He remembered that he hadn't read today's morning paper yet, to see if Eye of Wisdom had prepared a notice to convene a secret gathering, and found that the demonist sect's message notifying him of the meeting had already appeared. Avon used a secret code to arrive at a hotel in the West District again. Following the pre-arranged knocking sequence, he knocked on the door of a room, where another, Joy, demoness was waiting for him. After a brief exchange, Avon learned that the demoness who contacted him was named Natalie, and her true identity was the mistress of a viscount, secretly a socialite who scouted young girls for nobles. This made Avon sigh. Demoness were indeed natural black widows, draining old men dry and then inheriting everything from them. Avon then recounted how he was forced to trick his brother Robert into taking the Spectator magic potion, and then how his brother sent him to Military Intelligence Section 9. He attributed the reason for him masquerading as the Spectator pathway to the sealed artifact he obtained, Golden Gaze. The demoness named Natalie, upon hearing that Avon had coincidentally infiltrated Military Intelligence Section 9, was indeed extremely excited. This was something many secret organizations wanted to do but failed to achieve. As for Avon being unable to continue advancing if he infiltrated, she told Avon that she would consult the high-ranking members of the demonist sect on how to resolve it, and hinted that the demonist sect had a demigod in Backland who would surely be able to protect him. Natalie didn't expect that merely taking over an peripheral member would bring her such a big surprise. Looking at Avon's beauty, which was no less than a demoness, she couldn't help but have Avon. Chapter 73, The Demoness Natalie and Digesting the Magic Potion. Natalie sat naked on the stool in front of the dressing table, gracefully lifting her foot to put on a silk stocking, and at the same time said to Avon, who was lying on the bed, "You should first use your sealed artifact to disguise yourself as a spectator. I will report your situation as soon as possible to see if there's a way to help you with your future promotion issues. Also, you must try your best to use your brother's connections to climb up within Military Intelligence Section 9. If necessary, I can also provide you with assistance, so you won't have to fight alone. If you need to contact me urgently in the future, send someone to deliver a letter to me. You can easily find out where I live. After sending the letter, come to this room and wait, and I will arrive as soon as possible." Avon, lying on the bed, was currently in a sage mode. He had not expected this demoness's style to be completely different from Mrs. Sharon and Helen. It was utterly wild, keeping him passive throughout, leaving him still somewhat dazed. However, upon hearing Natalie's contact method, Avon couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Are all you demonesses' contact methods the same? Do you all rent rooms long-term in hotels?" After Natalie finished dressing, she saw Avon still playing dead on the bed. She sat on the edge of the bed, stroked Avon's face, and chuckled. "Don't worry, if you follow me, I won't mistreat you. Although my sister discovered you, we sisters are of one heart, we don't differentiate between us. You shouldn't harbor any resentment. Avon felt a chill in his heart hearing this. Mrs. Sharon was a male who became female after consuming a magic potion. According to the demoness sect's custom, high-sequence demonesses would turn the father of a male child into a demoness after pregnancy. So, Mrs. Sharon's father had already become a mother, meaning it was impossible for her to have a younger sister. If she had a younger sister, it would be a half-sister from a different father. How could such a blood relationship have any familial affection? But Avon could only pretend not to know, acting exceptionally surprised. Since this is our first meeting, I should give you a welcome gift. Is there anything you want? Avon, like a shy puppy, said. Before I came, Mrs. Sharon had already given me the instigator and witch magic potion formulas, and I already feel that the assassin magic potion has been digested. Can you give me the instigator materials? Natalie was clearly surprised, looking at Avon with cold eyes, then asked. She gave you the formula in advance. Also, how long have you been taking the assassin magic potion? How did you digest it so quickly? Mrs. Sharon actually gave me the magic potion a long time ago, but she hadn't reported it to the sect before. A few days ago, after I left Tingen, she told me all the subsequent formulas. Avon lied brazenly, confident that Mrs. Sharon would be eliminated by the official Beander team in the next 2 days. So, he directly shifted the blame for his rapid magic potion digestion and prior knowledge of the magic potion formulas onto Mrs. Sharon, laying the groundwork for his own rapid promotion later. However, Natalie's eyes were filled with killing intent, because one of the main methods for secret organizations to control their members was through magic potion formulas and magic potion materials. In Natalie's eyes, Mrs. Sharon's actions were not only defying the organization but also a provocation to her. From beginning to end, Natalie never thought that Avon was deceiving her, or even instigating her to provoke her dissatisfaction with Mrs. Sharon. Because her mind had been misled by Avon's preconceived performance, making her believe that Avon was just a pretty boy with a good brother. Since my sister has already given you the magic potion formula, I cannot be too stingy. How about this? I still have an instigator Beander characteristic on hand. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., I will have someone deliver it to you here. You can take it today. Natalie had originally intended to use the instigator formula to hook Avon, but since Avon already knew the formula, she could only offer the Beander characteristic. Otherwise, she, as the new superior, would appear inferior to Mrs. Sharon. Really? Thank you so much. I will definitely obey your commands. Upon hearing this, Avon repeatedly pledged his loyalty, acting like a lickspittle, while Natalie covered her mouth and chuckled, then vanished. After Natalie became invisible, Avon quickly got up, put on his clothes, and wandered outside until an hour later, when the black dot in his gray-white vision moved far away from him. No demoness is easy to fool. If it weren't for the gray-white vision, I might have really thought she had left already. Looking at the disappearing black dot in his vision, Avon cursed inwardly while instinctively rubbing his waist, feeling that Natalie was even more troublesome than Mrs. Sharon and Helen combined. Why is she so excited? Comparing Mrs. Sharon and Natalie, Avon felt that Natalie might be more valued by the demoness sect, because Mrs. Sharon had started to indulge in her female identity, beginning to deviate from the demoness sect's acting. Natalie, however, still regarded herself as a man internally, and instead treated Avon as an unparalleled beauty, roughly and wildly in bed. The problem was that Avon didn't want to be a woman. Knowing that all demonesses of the demoness sect were men, getting into bed with them was already disgusting. Now, being treated as a woman made Avon almost unable to suppress the killing intent in his heart. Just then, Avon suddenly felt two shattering sounds within his body. His hunter magic potion and assassin magic potion were digested simultaneously. Avon revealed a wicked, charming smile. He knew that Mrs. Sharon had perished under his remote command, and Triss, under Avon's prior arrangements, had fallen into the net and become prey. Sometimes, eliminating a target can be done through others. Assassination is just a means, successful assassination is the goal. Acquiring information about the prey in advance makes it easier to capture them. In setting up the trap to capture Triss, Avon cleverly obtained a lot of information from the Lord of the Mysteries, which allowed him to easily draw Mr. Z into the scheme, successfully capturing Triss from 1,000 miles away, leaving a handle for his future plans. The simultaneous digestion of the Assassin Magic Potion and Hunter Magic Potion greatly improved Avon's mood, and somewhat dispelled the disgust he felt about being in bed with Natalie. Avon turned a corner, got on a public carriage to his apartment in Sherwood Borough to change clothes, and prepared to attend the secret gathering held by Isengard Stanton. He wanted to inquire about his intelligence work on Zerel and also collect some materials for promotion, as he had already obtained the Provoker Beander characteristic today, and would get the Instigator Beander characteristic tomorrow. He wanted to raise his sequence and increase his strength as quickly as possible to control that mysterious city. He was tired of sleeping with men. Chapter 74, Beander Bullets. It was the same process, the same place. Avon hid his face behind a mask, wearing a hooded robe. He sat down in the corner of the living room, which had only one candle, and leisurely looked around, feeling that there were more people attending this gathering than last time. After he entered, Isengard Stanton, who was sitting on the sofa, visibly paused when he saw him, clearly recognizing Avon, but it was not convenient to greet him yet. When Isengard Stanton felt that most of the people had arrived, he announced the start of the gathering. As usual, everyone first bought and sold items they wanted to dispose of. Avon found that most of them were not very valuable, and even if he had a need, he could buy them cheaply within Military Intelligence Section 9. Avon felt that attending a gathering of wild beyonders was not very cost-effective for him. Just as Avon was about to doze off from boredom, a female voice spoke up. "I wonder if the gentleman who possesses the barbarian magic potion formula has arrived." Avon's spirits lifted. This was his biggest goal, so he spoke. "I am here, madam. Have you collected the materials I requested at the last gathering?" "No, but this time I brought some bullets with different effects, such as demon hunter bullets that can deal with foul and corrupted creatures, purification bullets that can deal with ghost-like monsters, and exorcism bullets that can deal with evil creatures. These bullets can be loaded into a revolver and are very powerful and useful. There are about 50 rounds, valued at £500. Can they be exchanged for the barbarian formula?" Avon chuckled inwardly. This was what Klein would exchange with this lady for the barbarian formula in the future. He didn't expect this transaction to reoccur with him, but it was a pity that he didn't lack such extraordinary bullets. This morning, at Military Intelligence Section 9, he had already received the corresponding bullets. These bullets sound very powerful and are convenient to use, but unfortunately, they are not what I need, so I am very sorry, I cannot trade with you. This lady obviously didn't expect that her carefully prepared Beander bullets would not move Avon, and she was momentarily speechless. Meanwhile, others who heard that their transaction had fallen through could not hold back, because Beander bullets were indeed powerful and simple to use, so they all started to bid. "I offer £550. I offer £600. I offer £601. After several rounds of bidding, these 50 Beander bullets were finally acquired for £651 by a man who always increased his bid by £1. This also restored some confidence to the lady selling the Beander bullets, but at the same time, she was troubled about how to exchange for the barbarian formula she had been desperately searching for from Avon. She had attended several gatherings but had not found the two materials Avon mentioned. Just then, a gentleman wanted to sell the marrow crystal of the elf spring. Since no one present had a need for it, Avon eventually acquired it for £240. Taking a small box from the attendant's tray, he opened it with a snap. Looking at the substance inside, which resembled a faded egg, Avon confirmed it was real and promptly placed the cash on the attendant's tray. Soon, the gathering's transactions concluded, and everyone began exchanging information. Avon listened for a while and, finding no useful information for him, stopped paying attention. Not long after, Isengard Stanton saw that everyone had almost finished exchanging, so he announced the end of the gathering and had the members leave one by one. At this point, the lady who had been hoping to obtain the barbarian formula suddenly requested to leave last and hoped to have a private conversation with Avon. Isengard Stanton looked at Avon, and seeing Avon nod in agreement, he consented to this request. When the other attendees of the gathering had gradually left, Isengard Stanton, being perceptive, also left the living room, leaving the space to Avon and the lady. After Isengard Stanton left, the lady immediately spoke. I very much hope to obtain that barbarian formula, but the items you want are very difficult to find. I haven't found any trace of these two materials at several gatherings. I wonder if you could consider a different material or item. Madam, my biggest goal right now is to advance further on the Meander pathway. Those two materials are crucial for my advancement, so I cannot relax my conditions. Avon said with a calm smile, not wanting to reveal his hand just yet. He still wanted to capture this lawyer lady. The entire living room fell silent. Avon's words were a bit too absolute, making the lady feel a bit withdrawn. Just as Avon thought the lady would have no choice but to give up, she unexpectedly said, "You are an official Meander, aren't you?" Avon was startled, his body tensing slightly, but he quickly realized he was the cat, not the mouse, and Isengard Stanton's gathering was just a regular Meander exchange, not one organized by a cult. He then relaxed and asked at his leisure, "What makes you say that?" Meander bullets, in the eyes of wild Beyonders, are no less valuable than ordinary mystical items, and even more so because they have no side effects. Yet, you seemed indifferent. It's clear that you have an organization behind you that can provide you with these things, making you accustomed to them. And in the Loan Kingdom, the magic potion formulas for the Arbiter pathway and Lawyer pathway are strictly controlled, and the materials are even harder to find. But you have no scruples, so the organization behind you should be Military Intelligence Section 9, right? The lady was very confident in her judgment. Her last sentence, though seemingly a question, was spoken with a very firm tone. She even wanted to see Avon's bewilderment after being caught off guard. However, to her disappointment, Avon was not flustered as she had imagined, as if his identity had been exposed. Instead, he casually crossed his legs and said with a relaxed smile, "Congratulations, you guessed correctly, but I'm sorry, there's no reward." Although Avon didn't deliberately provoke her, in the lady's eyes, Avon was mocking her, as if saying, "So what if you guessed it?" This made an unidentifiable fire surge within her, but she couldn't vent it. Avon, through the augmentation of the golden gaze, perceived her anger from her trembling body, but he did not react in any way. Avon was not afraid of ruining his plan, because selling Arbiter pathway and Lawyer pathway formulas and materials in Backland would indeed be tracked by Military Intelligence Section 9. This was something Avon had only learned today, supposedly originating from a sealed artifact. However, Avon and Klein from the original work were not afraid of this restriction, because Klein's formula came from the Blasphemy Slate. And Avon's formula came from Lord of the Mysteries. Neither of these could be traced by a sealed artifact, so Avon knew that before Klein arrived in Backland and obtained the Blasphemy Slate, this lady would absolutely not be able to obtain the corresponding formula through other channels. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.